Hey there, welcome to Bread Arrows. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. If these stories give you chills, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Get cozy and let the fear take over. The moment I stepped into the old mansion on the edge of Willow Creek, Maine, I felt it, a prickle on the back of my neck, like the air itself was watching me. The place was perfect for my next article, a sprawling, decaying relic from the 1920s, once owned by a reclusive writer named Elias Hawthorne, who vanished without a trace. The locals called it the Hollow, and the name fit. The house felt empty, hollowed out by time, its walls sagging under the weight of forgotten stories. Aidan Marshall, freelance journalist with a knack for chasing ghost stories, had come here to dig into its past. A quick piece for an online magazine, maybe a few creepy details to hook the readers. That was the plan. The first day was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. The mansion stood alone, surrounded by gnarled pines that blocked out most of the sunlight. The air inside was heavy, thick with the scent of damp wood and something sour, like old paper left to rot. The wooden floors groaned under my boots, each step echoing through the cavernous rooms. I set up my laptop in the study, a dusty room lined with bookshelves, their spines cracked and faded. A massive oak desk sat in the center, carved with intricate patterns that looked almost alive in the dim light. I unpacked my recorder, my notebook, and a thermos of coffee, ready to settle in. That night I met Mary Brown, the town librarian. She was a wiry woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a voice that carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much. She stopped by with a box of old records about the Hollow, her hands trembling slightly as she handed them over. "You sure you want to stay here, Aidan?" she asked, her gaze flickering toward the darkened windows. "This place, it's got a way of holding onto people." I laughed it off, told her I'd slept in worse places chasing stories. She didn't smile. "Elias Hawthorne disappeared here," she said. "They say he made a deal with something that didn't let him go." I nodded, jotting it down. Good material for the article. I didn't believe in deals with demons. The first night passed without incident. I slept in a creaky bed on the second floor, the wind howling outside, rattling the shutters like restless spirits. The house was old, I told myself. Old houses make noises. The hum of the radiator, the sigh of the walls settling, the distant creak of a loose board. Normal. I drifted off, the recorder running beside me, just in case. But the second night, something changed. I woke up to a sound. Not a creak or a groan, but a sharp, rhythmic tapping, like someone striking a spoon against a glass. It came from downstairs, faint but deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. I sat up, heart thudding, straining to hear it again. Silence. Then there it was, tap, 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 faster now, like a code. Morse code, maybe. I grabbed my phone, the flashlight beam cutting through the dark, and crept to the door. The air felt colder, heavier, like I was wading through fog. I told myself it was just pipes, just the house playing tricks. But the tapping didn't stop. It grew louder, more insistent, as if it wanted me to follow it. I moved down the staircase, each step creaking under my weight, the sound too loud in the stillness. The tapping led me to the dining room, a long, narrow space with a chandelier that swayed slightly, though there was no breeze. The beam of my flashlight caught the glint of crystal, casting jagged shadows on the walls. The tapping stopped the moment I crossed the threshold. I stood there, breath held, waiting. Nothing, just the hum of silence pressing against my ears like water. I was about to turn back when I heard it, a voice. Not a whisper, but a low, melodic hum, like someone reading aloud in another room. It was soft, almost soothing, but it didn't belong here. I was alone. I checked every room on the first floor, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The kitchen, the parlor, the study empty. The hum faded, leaving only the sound of my own breathing, ragged and quick. Back in my room, I played the recorder. Nothing but static and the faint creak of the house. I tried to sleep, but the air felt different now. Thicker, like it was watching me. I told myself it was just nerves. I'd heard worse stories, stayed in creepier places. But the hollow felt alive, in a way I couldn't explain. The next morning, I found the journal. It was tucked behind a loose panel in the study, a leather-bound book with yellowed pages, the ink faded but legible. Elias Hawthorne's handwriting sprawled across the pages, jagged and uneven. "The words come easier now," he wrote, "but they're not mine. Something speaks through me, something old. It wants more than I can give." I flipped through the pages, my skin prickling. The entries grew stranger, more frantic. "It's in the walls, it's in the mirrors, it won't let me leave." I closed the book, my hands unsteady. Just a story, I told myself. Just a crazy writer's ramblings. But that afternoon, the sounds returned. Not tapping this time, but a low, scraping noise, like nails dragging across wood. It came from the attic. I hesitated, the journal's words echoing in my mind. But I was here for a story, and stories don't come from staying safe. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed the narrow stairs to the attic door. It was locked, the handle rusted, but the scraping grew louder, more urgent. I pushed against the door, and it gave way with a groan, revealing a dark, cavernous space. The attic was a maze of crates and cobwebs, the air thick with dust. My flashlight beam danced across the room, catching glimpses of old furniture, cracked mirrors, and stacks of manuscripts. The scraping stopped, replaced by a new sound, a faint, childlike giggle. It wasn't innocent. It was sharp, mocking, like it knew I was there. I spun around, the beam shaking in my hand. Nothing, just shadows, but they weren't right. They moved when they shouldn't, stretching across the walls like fingers reaching for me. I backed toward the door, my heart pounding. The giggle came again, closer now, right behind me. I turned, but the attic was empty. The air grew colder, my breath visible in the dim light. Something brushed against my arm, light as a feather, but cold as ice. I stumbled, nearly dropping the flashlight. The giggle turned into a whisper, words I couldn't make out, curling in my ears like smoke. I ran, down the stairs, through the hallway, back to the study. My hands shook as I locked the door behind me, but the whispers followed, seeping through the walls. They weren't just sounds now, they were inside my head, tugging at my thoughts, pulling me toward something I couldn't see. That night I didn't sleep. The house wouldn't let me. The tapping returned, louder, more frantic, like a heartbeat in the walls. The whispers grew clearer, fragments of sentences that didn't make sense. "You see us. Stay. Ours." I clutched the journal, flipping through its pages for answers. Elias had written about a mirror in the ballroom, a tall, ornate thing that showed more than it should. I hadn't seen a ballroom, but I knew I had to find it. The next morning, I searched the house. The ballroom was hidden behind a false wall in the parlor, its door unmarked, almost invisible. I pushed it open, and the air turned cold, sharp, like stepping into winter. The room was vast, its walls lined with cracked mirrors that reflected nothing but darkness. In the center stood the mirror Elias had described, its frame carved with strange, twisting shapes that seemed to writhe in the corner of my eye. I approached it, my reflection distorted, stretched thin. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices now, overlapping, laughing, pleading. My hand hovered over the glass, and for a moment I saw someone behind me. A figure, tall and thin, its edges flickering like a candle flame. I spun around, but the room was empty. Just me and the mirrors. The giggle came again, sharp and cruel, echoing through the room. The air grew heavy, pressing against my chest. I backed away, but the mirror seemed to pull me closer, the glass rippling like water. My reflection twisted, my face no longer my own. It was Elias Hawthorne's face, pale and hollow, his eyes black pits that stared into me. I stumbled back, tripping over a loose board. The journal fell from my hands, its pages scattering. The whispers turned into a scream, a sound that wasn't human, wasn't anything I could name. The mirrors around me cracked, one by one, the sound like gunfire. I scrambled to my feet, my breath ragged, and ran for the door. But the house wasn't done with me. The hallway outside the ballroom stretched endlessly, the walls bending, pulsing like a living thing. My footsteps echoed, but they weren't alone. Something followed me, footsteps, heavy and deliberate, matching my own. I didn't dare look back. The air was thick, suffocating, the temperature dropping with every step. My breath fogged in front of me, sharp and white. I turned a corner and the footsteps stopped. Silence, too much silence. My heart pounded in my chest, the only sound left. I kept moving, the hallway twisting, looping back on itself. The house was a maze now, a trap. I couldn't find the front door, couldn't find the stairs. Every turn led to another hallway, another dead end. And then I saw it, the figure from the mirror. It stood at the end of the hall, tall and thin, its form flickering like static. It didn't move, but I felt it watching me, its presence heavy, suffocating. The whispers returned, louder now, a cacophony of voices screaming my name. Aiden, stay, you're ours. I ran, my legs burning, my lungs aching. The house seemed to fight me, the floor tilting, the walls closing in. I could hear it now, a low, rumbling groan like the house itself was alive, angry. The figure was closer now, its footsteps heavy, dragging across the floor. I felt something cold brush against my neck, like fingers made of ice. I turned another corner and saw it, the front door. It was there, solid, real. I sprinted toward it, my hand reaching for the handle. But the door wouldn't budge. It was locked, sealed shut, the wood pulsing under my touch like a heartbeat. I pounded on it, screaming, my voice hoarse. The laughter came again, louder, sharper, filling the air, filling my head. The figure was behind me now, its shadow stretching across the walls, swallowing the light. I turned, my back against the door, and saw it, closer than ever, its form twisting, shifting, like it was trying to become something real. I didn't think, I just acted. I remembered the journal, Elias' words about the mirror. It's the heart, he'd written. Break it, and it ends. I didn't know if it was true, but I had nothing else. I ran back toward the ballroom, the figure's laughter chasing me, the walls groaning louder, the air so cold it burned my skin. The ballroom was darker now, the mirrors shattered but still standing, their jagged edges glinting in the dim light. The central mirror was still intact, its surface rippling like a storm. I grabbed a piece of broken wood from the floor, my hands shaking, and swung it at the mirror. The glass shattered, the sound deafening like the world breaking apart. The laughter stopped. The whispers stopped. The house fell silent. For a moment I thought it was over. I stood there, panting, the wood still in my hands, glass crunching under my boots. The air was still, the cold fading. I turned to leave, my heart still racing, but something stopped me. A sound, faint but growing louder, a giggle, a whisper. You shouldn't have stayed. The shadows moved again, faster now, swirling around me. The figure was back, its form clearer, its face a twisted mockery of my own. It reached for me, its fingers cold, so cold, wrapping around my wrist. I screamed, pulling away, but the shadows were everywhere, pulling me down, dragging me into the darkness. The last thing I saw was the mirror, its broken pieces reflecting nothing but black. And then silence. It began with a question, one that slipped into my mind like a splinter. What if the darkness you fear is already inside you? I didn't expect anything to shift when I moved to Willow Creek, a sleepy town in Maine, tucked away in a fog-soaked corner of the state. The house I rented was old, its clapboard siding peeling like dead skin, its windows cloudy with age. It was cheap, though, and that's what mattered. I'd lost my job as a copywriter in Boston 6 months ago, right after my fiancée, Clara, walked out. Her last words still burned. "You're not the man I thought you were, Ethan." I didn't argue. How could I? I'd failed her, failed myself, and the weight of that failure clung to me like damp air. This house with its creaking floors and sagging porch was supposed to be my escape, a place to write, to rebuild, to forget. The realtor said it had been empty for years, abandoned after its last owner vanished without a trace. That didn't bother me. I wanted solitude. I wanted to disappear. But then I found it, the diary. It was buried in the basement, hidden beneath a pile of warped cardboard boxes and mildewed newspapers. I'd been clearing out junk, trying to make the place feel less like a tomb, when my fingers brushed against its cracked leather cover. It was small, unassuming, the kind of thing you'd overlook if you weren't paying attention. I almost tossed it aside, thinking it was just another relic left behind. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe something else, made me open it. The first few pages were blank, yellowed with age, the edges curling like dead leaves. Then the writing appeared. It wasn't mine. The house breathes at night. I hear it. The walls hum like they're alive. Something moves in the dark. My stomach twisted. The handwriting was sharp, jagged, like it had been scratched into the paper with a trembling hand. I turned the page, my breath catching. The footsteps come closer every night. I'm alone. I know I'm alone, but they're there. I snapped the diary shut, my pulse hammering in my ears. It was just someone's ramblings, I told myself. Some lonely soul who'd lived here before, scribbling their fears into this book. But the words lingered, sharp and heavy, like a blade pressed against my throat. That night the house felt different. The air was thick, oppressive, like it was holding its breath. I tried to laugh it off, chalk it up to my own frayed nerves. I hadn't slept well in weeks, not since Clara left. Her memory haunted me, her laugh, her touch, the way she'd look at me when I'd let her down. I'd promised her a future, but I couldn't even hold myself together. Maybe that's why the diary's words hit so hard. They felt personal. I crawled into bed, the old mattress creaking under my weight. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional groan of the house settling. But as the hours dragged on, the quiet turned heavy, unnatural. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread in my chest. Then I heard it. A sound, soft at first, barely a whisper. A faint shuffle like someone dragging their feet across the floorboards downstairs. My heart thudded. I held my breath, straining to listen. Nothing. Just the wind, I told myself. Just the old house creaking in the October chill. But then it came again, louder, closer, deliberate, step, 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 like someone was pacing just below my room. I sat up, my hands clammy, my pulse racing. The air felt colder now, sharp against my skin. I wanted to call out, to demand who was there, but my throat was dry, my voice gone. The footsteps stopped, right beneath the floor. Silence swallowed the house again, but it wasn't empty. It was alive, waiting. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every creak, every gust of wind rattling the windows sent my heart racing. The diary sat on the nightstand, its leather cover glinting faintly in the moonlight. I didn't touch it, not yet. But its presence was like a weight, pulling my thoughts back to those words. Something moves in the dark. The next morning, I needed to get out. The house felt too small, too suffocating. I grabbed my jacket and headed into town, hoping the crisp fall air would clear my head. Willow Creek was quiet, its main street lined with brick storefronts and pumpkins carved for Halloween. The locals nodded as I passed, but their smiles were tight, their eyes wary. I stopped at the diner, ordered a coffee, black like always, in a to-go cup with a Dunkin' logo faded from too many washes. The waitress, a woman with graying hair and a name tag that read Doris, gave me a long look. "You're in the old Miller house, aren't you?" she asked, her voice low, like she didn't want the other patrons to hear. I nodded, unsure where this was going. "Yeah, just moved in." She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Be careful up there. That place, it's got a history." I forced a laugh, but it came out hollow. "What, like it's haunted?" She didn't smile. "Just watch yourself, okay?" Her words stuck with me as I left the diner, the coffee burning my hand through the cup. I decided to head to the library, a squat brick building at the edge of town. Maybe I could dig up something about the house, something to explain the diary, the footsteps, the unease that had settled into my bones. The librarian, Lisa Crow, was a woman in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes and a warm smile that didn't quite reach them. She seemed to know everyone in town, greeting me like we'd met before. I asked about the house, keeping my tone casual, but her expression shifted. "The Miller house," she said, her voice careful. "It's been empty for years. Last owner, Samuel Reed, disappeared back in '98, left everything behind. Folks say he went mad up there alone." "Mad how?" I asked, my throat tightening. Lisa glanced around, then lowered her voice. "He used to talk about things, shadows, voices, said the house was watching him. Nobody took him seriously, not until he was gone." I swallowed hard, thinking of the diary. Did he leave anything behind, like writings? She frowned, studying me. "There were rumors he kept a journal. Never found it, though. Why do you ask?" I mumbled something about curiosity and left, my mind spinning. The diary wasn't just a relic, it was Samuel's. And whatever he'd been afraid of, whatever he'd written about, was now crawling into my life. Back at the house, the air felt heavier, the shadows longer. I tried to write, to lose myself in the novel I'd come here to finish, but the words wouldn't come. My thoughts kept drifting to Clara, her face when she left, the way she'd begged me to get help, to stop shutting her out. I'd pushed her away, too caught up in my own failures to see how much she needed me. And now she was gone, and I was alone with this house, this diary, this growing sense that something was wrong. That night the footsteps returned, louder, closer. They didn't stop downstairs this time. They climbed the stairs, slow and deliberate, each step echoing like a hammer in my chest. I froze, my breath shallow, my eyes locked on the bedroom door. The knob rattled just once, then stopped. Silence. But it wasn't over. A shadow moved across the wall, a dark smear that didn't belong. It wasn't cast by anything in the room, no lamp, no moonlight. It was just there, shifting, watching. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. I grabbed the diary, my hands shaking, and flipped it open. The shadow is here, it waits, it knows me. The words hit like a punch. I slammed the diary shut, but the shadow didn't vanish. It grew, spreading across the wall like ink spilling over paper. I stumbled back, my breath ragged, my mind screaming at me to run. But where? The house felt alive now, its walls pulsing, its air thick with something I couldn't name. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The shadow lingered, a silent presence that followed me from room to room. By morning, I was a wreck, my eyes burning, my hands trembling. I needed answers. I needed to know what was happening. I went back to the library, clutching the diary like it was a lifeline. Lisa was there, sorting books, but her face paled when she saw me. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, half joking. I didn't laugh. I showed her the diary, told her about the footsteps, the shadow, the words that felt like they were written for me. She listened, her expression growing darker with every word. "You need to leave that house, Ethan," she said finally. "Whatever's in there, it's not right." But I couldn't leave. Not yet. The diary was pulling me back, its words a tether I couldn't break. I returned to the house, the October fog rolling in thick and heavy, wrapping the world in a gray haze. The air smelled of damp leaves and something sharper, like decay. Inside, the house was colder than ever. The diary sat on the kitchen table, open, though I hadn't touched it. I froze, staring at the page. A new entry, one I hadn't seen before. "It's coming, it's always been here." My blood ran cold. I hadn't written those words. I hadn't even opened the diary since last night. But there they were, scratched in that same jagged handwriting. My hands shook as I turned the page. The shadow is me. I can't run from it. I dropped the diary, my heart racing. The air grew heavier, the shadows darker. I heard it then, a whisper, soft but clear. "Ethan." My name, spoken by no one. The voice came from everywhere, the walls, the floor, the air itself. I spun around, but the room was empty. Just me and the diary, just me and the shadow. I ran, out the door into the fog, my breath sharp in the cold night air. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away. My feet carried me past the town, past the diner, into the woods that bordered Willow Creek. The trees loomed like skeletal hands, their branches clawing at the sky. The fog was thicker here, swallowing the world, but I kept running until I reached the old cemetery at the edge of town. The gravestones were weathered, their names barely legible. I collapsed against one, my chest heaving, my mind a storm of fear and confusion. The diary's words echoed in my head. "The shadow is me." What did it mean? Was I losing my mind? Or was something in that house, something in me, trying to take over? The whispers followed me. "Ethan." They were louder now, circling me like predators. I clutched my head, trying to block them out, but they were inside me, burrowing into my thoughts. I thought of Clara again, her voice pleading with me to change, to let her in. I hadn't listened. I'd let my fears, my guilt, consume me. And now here I was, alone in a graveyard, with voices that weren't mine filling the air. I stumbled back to the house, driven by some desperate need to understand. The diary was still on the table, its pages open to a new entry. You can't escape, it's always been you. The words burned into my mind. I wanted to scream, to tear the diary apart, but I couldn't move. The shadows were everywhere now, slithering across the walls, pooling on the floor like spilled ink. The air was so cold I could see my breath, each puff hanging in the air like a ghost. "Ethan." The voice was closer now, right behind me. I turned, but there was nothing, just the shadows, growing, shifting, taking shape. A figure stood in the corner of the room, tall and formless, its edges blurring into the darkness. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything. It was a void, a black hole that swallowed the light. "You're mine," it whispered, the words scraping across my mind like nails on a chalkboard. I backed away, my legs trembling, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. The figure moved closer, its form shifting, pulsing like it was alive. I could feel it, its presence, its weight, pressing down on me, squeezing the air from my lungs. And then I saw it. In the reflection of the window, my face, but not my face. It was pale, hollow, the eyes empty, like they'd been carved out. I blinked, and the reflection changed, the figure standing behind me now, its dark form towering over my own. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the house. The shadows closed in, wrapping around me like tendrils, pulling me down. I fought, clawing at the air, but it was no use. The figure was everywhere inside me, around me, filling every space until there was nothing left. "You've always known," it said, its voice now my own. And I did know. The truth hit me like a wave, cold and relentless. The shadow wasn't something outside me. It was me, my guilt, my failure. The part of me that had pushed Clara away, that had let her slip through my fingers because I was too afraid to face myself. The diary fell open in front of me, its pages blank now. But the words were still there, burned into my mind. It's me. I am the shadow. I sank to my knees, the weight of it all crushing me. The house was silent now, but the silence was worse than the whispers. It was the silence of truth, of knowing that I couldn't run from myself. The figure was gone, but I could still feel it, inside me, waiting. I don't know how long I stayed there, curled up on the floor, the diary lying open beside me. Hours, maybe, days. Time didn't matter anymore. The house was still, but it wasn't empty. It never had been. I stood, my legs unsteady, and looked around. The walls were the same, the furniture unchanged. Everything was as it had been, except for one thing. The diary was gone. I searched, tearing through the house, but it was nowhere. It was as if it had never existed. But I knew better. I knew what it had shown me. I was the shadow. The realization settled into my bones, heavy and cold. I'd come to Willow Creek to escape, to start over, but there was no starting over. Not for me. The darkness wasn't in the house. It wasn't in the diary. It was in me. I stepped outside, the fog still thick, the air sharp with the scent of autumn. The town was quiet, the streets empty. I could hear the whispers again, faint but persistent, calling my name. Ethan, they would never stop. I walked away from the house, not looking back. But I knew it wasn't over. It would never be over. The shadow was mine, and I was its forever. It was a chilly October evening in the small town of Pine Hollow, nestled deep in the rolling hills of upstate New York. The kind of place where everyone knew your name, and the annual fall festival was the biggest event of the year. Emily Carter, 25, had moved here 3 months ago, trading the chaos of the city for a quieter life as the town's new librarian. She told herself it was a fresh start after losing her job at a big publishing house. But the truth was, she was running from the stress that had started to fray her nerves. Pine Hollow seemed perfect, peaceful, quaint, the kind of place where nothing ever happened. But tonight, as she walked home from the library through the dense woods that bordered the town, something felt off. The air was crisp, heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a bruised purple, streaked with clouds that looked like they were hiding secrets. Emily's boots crunched on the gravel path, the sound steady, almost comforting. But as she moved deeper into the woods, a prickle of unease crawled up her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. It was subtle at first, like a whisper in the back of her mind, but it grew stronger with every step. Someone or something was watching her. She quickened her pace, her breath puffing out in little clouds. "It's just the woods," she told herself. "You're tired. You've been reading too many of those old ghost stories in the library." But the logic didn't help. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their branches clawing at the sky, and the shadows stretched longer, darker, like they were reaching for her. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see a deer or a stray dog. Nothing. Just the endless stretch of trees, and the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. Emily shook her head, scolding herself. She was being ridiculous. She'd walked this path a dozen times since moving here, and nothing had ever happened. But tonight, the silence felt wrong. Too heavy, too still. And then she heard it, a faint crunch of gravel just a few steps behind her. Her heart skipped a beat. She stopped, listening, her pulse loud in her ears. The woods were quiet again, but the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm. She started walking again, faster now, her boots hitting the ground hard. The crunch came again, deliberate, matching her pace. She spun around, her eyes scanning the path. Nothing. Just the empty trail and the trees, their bark etched with strange, jagged marks she hadn't noticed before. Her stomach twisted. Were those scratches always there? She told herself it was just animals, maybe a bear or a fox. But the marks looked too precise, almost like someone had carved them with a knife. By the time she reached her house, a creaky 2-story Victorian on the edge of town, she was practically running. She fumbled with her keys, her hands trembling, and slammed the door behind her. The lock clicked into place, and she leaned against the door, catching her breath. Safe. She was safe. But the feeling of being watched didn't fade. It clung to her like damp clothes, heavy and suffocating. She tried to shake it off, busying herself with making tea in the kitchen. The house was old, with uneven floors and windows that rattled in the wind. It was charming in the daylight, but at night, every creak sounded like a warning. She sipped her tea, staring out the kitchen window at the dark woods beyond. The trees swayed gently, their branches casting eerie shapes on the ground. For a moment, she thought she saw something move, a flicker of shadow, too tall, too human to be a trick of the light. She blinked, and it was gone. "It's nothing," she told herself, gripping the mug tighter. "You're just stressed. New town, new job, new life. It's a lot." But the words felt hollow. She couldn't ignore the way her skin prickled, the way her heart kept racing long after she'd locked the door. The next morning, Emily tried to push the unease aside. She walked to the library, the same path through the woods, though the daylight made it feel less threatening. The town was buzzing with preparations for the fall festival, and she passed a few locals setting up booths in the square. She waved, forcing a smile, but the feeling of being watched lingered, like a shadow she couldn't shake. At the library, she threw herself into work, organizing books and helping kids with their homework. But during a quiet moment, she found herself drawn to the local history section. Pine Hollow had a reputation for strange stories, whispered tales of people vanishing in the woods. She'd heard bits and pieces from the locals, mostly old-timers who loved to scare newcomers. Curious, she pulled out a dusty book titled Legends of Pine Hollow. The pages were yellowed, the ink faded, but one chapter caught her eye, The Whisper in the Woods. The story told of a shadow that haunted the forest, a figure that appeared to those who wandered too far from town. It didn't have a face, but it watched, it followed, and those who saw it never came back the same. Some said it was the spirit of a settler who'd gone mad in the woods centuries ago. Others claimed it was something older, something that didn't belong to this world. The book described it as a presence that fed on fear, growing stronger the more you noticed it. Emily's throat tightened as she read. It was just a story, right? Just a silly legend to scare kids at campfires. She slammed the book shut, her hands shaking. It was nonsense. She was a rational person. Shadows didn't follow people, but the words stuck with her, burrowing into her mind like a splinter. That evening, she met up with Jake Miller, the town mechanic, and one of the few people she'd gotten to know in Pine Hollow. They sat at the diner, sipping coffee as the neon sign buzzed outside. Jake was all easy smiles and small-town charm, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, grinning. Emily forced a laugh. "Just tired. This town's quieter than I'm used to." "Quiet's good," Jake said, leaning back. "But you gotta watch out for those woods. Folks say they're haunted." She raised an eyebrow, trying to play it cool. "Haunted? Come on, Jake. You don't believe that stuff, do you?" He shrugged, his grin fading. "I don't know. My grandpa used to talk about the whisper in the woods, said it was real. Said it followed his brother once, back in the 50s. Poor guy was never the same after. Kept saying he heard it calling his name, even in his house." Emily's stomach churned. "That's just a story," she said, but her voice wavered. "Maybe," Jake said, "but those woods, they've got a way of making you feel things. Just be careful, all right?" She nodded, but his words echoed in her mind as she walked home. The woods were darker now, the air colder. Every rustle of leaves made her jump, every snap of a twig sent her heart racing. She kept her eyes on the path, refusing to look into the trees. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was there, just out of sight, watching her every move. When she got home, she locked the door and checked every window. The house felt too big, too empty. She tried to distract herself with a book, but every creak of the floorboards made her flinch. She told herself it was just the house settling, just the wind outside. But deep down, she knew better. That night, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that shadow from the woods, tall, formless, its edges blurring into the darkness. She kept her bedside lamp on, the light a small comfort against the oppressive dark. But even that didn't help. Around 2 a.m, she heard it, a faint tapping like fingers brushing against the window. She sat up, her heart pounding. The sound stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. It was heavy, alive, like the house was holding its breath. The next day, Emily was a wreck. She couldn't focus at work, her hands shaking as she shelved books. The library felt too quiet, the stacks looming like the trees in the woods. She kept glancing over her shoulder, expecting to see that shadow again. By the time she closed up, the sun was setting, and the thought of walking through the woods made her stomach twist. She called Jake, her voice trembling. "Can you walk me home? I know it sounds stupid, but I'm freaked out." He didn't laugh. "I'll be there in 10. When he arrived, he looked serious, his usual grin gone. "You okay?" he asked as they started down the path. "I don't know," she admitted. "I keep feeling like something's following me, like it's watching me." Jake frowned, glancing into the woods. "You read about the whisper, didn't you?" She nodded, her throat tight. "It's just a story, right?" He didn't answer right away. "I hope so," he said finally. "But I saw something once when I was a kid, in the woods. It wasn't normal." Her blood ran cold. "What did you see?" He hesitated. "A shadow, tall, like it didn't belong. It was gone when I looked again, but I never forgot how it felt, like it was looking right through me." They walked in silence after that, the woods pressing in around them. Emily's heart raced, her eyes darting to every shadow, every flicker of movement. She wanted to believe it was all in her head, that she was just tired, just stressed. But then she heard it, a low whisper, barely audible, like leaves rustling, but with words she couldn't quite make out. She froze, grabbing Jake's arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. He listened, his face pale. "Yeah," he said softly, "I heard it." They ran the rest of the way to her house, not stopping until they were inside with the door locked. Jake stayed for a while, checking the house, but he didn't find anything. "You sure you're okay here alone?" he asked. "I'll be fine," Emily lied, her voice shaking. She didn't want to admit how scared she was, how real it felt. After Jake left, the house felt colder, emptier. She tried to sleep, but the whisper came again, louder this time, seeping through the walls. "You can't hide," it said, the words clear now, chilling her to the bone. She sat up, her heart pounding, and grabbed a flashlight from the nightstand. She wasn't going to sit here, paralyzed by fear. She had to do something. The house was silent as she crept downstairs, the flashlight's beam cutting through the dark. The air felt thick, heavy with something she couldn't name. She checked every room, every corner, but found nothing. Then she noticed the door to the basement, slightly ajar. She hadn't been down there since moving in. It was damp, cluttered with old boxes, and gave her the creeps. But something told her she had to go down there. She had to know. The stairs creaked under her weight, the air growing colder with every step. The basement was dark, the flashlight barely piercing the shadows. She swept the beam around, her breath catching as it landed on something, a figure standing in the corner. It was tall, its edges blurred, like smoke curling in on itself. It didn't move, but she could feel its presence, heavy and oppressive, like it was pressing against her chest. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The figure didn't answer, but the whispering started again, low and guttural, filling the room. "You're mine," it said, the words echoing in her mind. She stumbled back, her flashlight shaking in her hand. The figure moved, gliding toward her, its form shifting and twisting. She turned and ran, her feet pounding on the stairs as she fled back to the main floor. She slammed the basement door shut, her hands trembling as she pushed a chair against it. Her heart was racing, her thoughts a chaotic mess. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But it was. The lights flickered, plunging the house into darkness. She froze, her breath shallow, as the whispering grew louder, closer. "Run, run, run," it taunted, the voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. She backed away, her eyes darting around the room. The shadows seemed to move, curling and twisting like living things. And then she saw it standing in the hallway, blocking her path to the front door. It was the same figure from the basement, its form clearer now, but still wrong, still unnatural. It didn't have a face, but she could feel its gaze burning into her, stripping away every defense she had. She screamed, stumbling backward, her hands fumbling for anything to protect herself. But there was nothing. The air grew colder, the darkness heavier, and the figure took a step forward. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor, her vision swimming. The last thing she heard was the whisper, soft and final, filling the space around her. "You're mine now," and then nothing. 3 nights ago, my father went out of town for business. The first night, I heard what sounded like a raccoon or possum scratching around outside. As of 4:13 in the morning when I'm writing this, I'm convinced they've finally given up. This is a long story, but it happened recently, and it's all true. I want to say I'm grateful they left, whether they knew I was armed or just decided I wasn't worth the trouble. 2 nights ago, I was woken up by my German shepherd, Bruno, sometime between 11 and 3 in the morning. He stayed close to me when I got up, making this low, threatening growl while facing toward the front of the house. He kept pressed against my leg, which he had never done before. I've been working with dogs for over a decade, and this behavior sent chills down my spine. That's when I heard it, someone talking in my front yard, no more than 20 feet away. The voice was low, like bad whispering or mumbling. I had been watching the Fellowship of the Ring on full volume, so whoever was out there had to know someone was home. For context, I have unusually sharp hearing for my age. If you whisper in a single-story house with 2 doors between us, I can usually make out individual words. The talking stopped abruptly when I opened my dresser drawer too loudly while reaching for my concealed .380. I noticed a shadow moving past the window, barely visible through my blackout curtains. The house was secure, all doors locked, nothing unusual inside, but Bruno had already bolted toward the back door. I grabbed my flashlight and followed him to the other side of the house. The person was gone. I figured they heard me moving around and ran off on foot. I did a quick perimeter check and thought, okay, I'm safe. Well, Florida continues to be Florida. On the 3rd night, Bruno did the same thing again, waking me up with that same protective stance. At this point, I grabbed my 12-gauge shotgun. Bruno was acting even more aggressively, giving me all the dog body language that screamed major threat, need backup, can't handle this alone. I froze for a moment when I realized what was happening. 2 people this time. This wasn't random anymore. They had to be planning something violent if they were willing to scope out a place with a Ring doorbell, a 60-plus pound attack dog, and an armed resident. They knew I was home, they knew about Bruno, but they came back anyway with reinforcements. This time, the voices were coming from behind the house. Bruno pulled what I can only describe as a complete berserker move. He let out the most aggressive, loud bark I've ever heard from any dog and sprinted straight to the back wall. I ran after him and shouted, "Attack them, they're dead men." That's when everything clicked for me. This was planned and professional. I checked every inch of the property with my shotgun ready. Bruno was worked up but calmer, like he knew he'd done his job. I'm buying him the biggest steak I can find. I went back inside and kept the gun within arm's reach of my bed. I barely slept that night. The next day, I started looking around for signs they'd been there. Sure enough, I found evidence. One of the trash cans by the gate had been rotated 180 degrees. The handle was now facing toward me instead of toward the wall like I always keep it. There were several crushed twigs and leaves near the back fence. When I went inside, I noticed the patio chair had been turned and moved slightly to the right. It was clearly out of place. The table set is symmetrical, so it was obvious if you lived there. The Ring camera and my neighbor's cameras didn't catch anything useful. But I knew these guys had to have known my father was out of town. They knew his adult son lived there, knew about Bruno, and that I was armed. Yet they came back with backup, then moved things around to test my awareness. My Marine buddy told me to check if so much as a pebble was out of place. It's a way to gauge someone's alertness and presence, he said. Whatever your plan was, let's not meet again. For an update, I'm safe and prepared. I've got armed neighbors who I've given a heads up to. I'm working on a police report and looking into good security cameras with motion detectors and lights. 2 days now without any disturbances. It's 5:30 in the morning as I'm getting ready for work, and the neighbors are watching the house. I've secured the gate and blocked the dog door too. The bedroom intruder. This happened several months ago, and it still terrifies me every time I think about it. It's one of those experiences I can't fully explain, but I know something was definitely wrong. I'm a 24-year-old guy living alone in a studio apartment in what I thought was a safe part of Denver. I've always felt secure here and never had reason to be paranoid. I take normal security precautions, always lock the door, check the windows, stay aware of my surroundings. I work from home most days, so I'm usually around. But on this particular day, I had to leave for several hours. It was a Tuesday morning. I left my apartment around 9:30 to run errands and meet a friend for lunch. I didn't expect to be gone long, maybe 4 or 5 hours maximum. When I returned around 3:30 in the afternoon, everything seemed normal until I reached for the door handle. The door was locked. Now, I'm absolutely certain I didn't lock it when I left. I have this habit of just leaving it unlocked during the day, which I know is probably stupid, but I'd always felt safe in this building. I never use the deadbolt during the day, just the regular lock when I leave for extended periods. Finding it locked made me pause. I told myself I must have locked it without thinking, but as I unlocked it and stepped inside, this uneasy feeling crept over me. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Living alone, the place is usually quiet when I return, but this felt different. Something was off. I walked through the main room, kitchen area, and bathroom, checking everything. Nothing seemed out of place. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. The closet door was completely shut. I'm someone who always leaves doors slightly open. It's just a habit. Seeing it fully closed gave me this sick feeling in my stomach. I walked over and opened it. The first thing that hit me was how cold it was inside. The small window above the closet was wide open. I never open that window, especially not in January with freezing temperatures outside. I always keep it shut, so seeing it open about 3 inches made my heart sink. I went to check the window. There was no sign of forced entry, no footprints in the snow outside, nothing obvious. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My clothes had been disturbed. It wasn't like I'd left them messy, but it was clear someone had been going through them. Shirts were shifted, hangers moved, and there was a definite impression on the floor where someone had been standing. I checked the window lock. It was fine, nothing broken or tampered with, but the fact that it was open, combined with the disturbed clothes, told me everything I needed to know. I searched the rest of the apartment thoroughly. Everything else was in order. No signs of forced entry anywhere, no missing items. My wallet was still on the kitchen counter where I'd left it. Nothing seemed stolen. Everything was undisturbed except for that locked door and the open window. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went to building management to check if there were security cameras, but the footage was useless. It only showed me leaving in the morning and returning in the afternoon. No other movement captured, but I knew someone had been inside. I could feel it. That feeling of being watched has never completely gone away. Even now, when I come home and notice something slightly out of place, that feeling returns. It's like someone was here, someone who waited for me to leave, and then made themselves comfortable in my space. I don't know if it was someone who knew me or a complete stranger, but I haven't felt entirely safe in this apartment since. I now check every lock twice when I leave and return. But I'll never forget that overwhelming sense of violation that stayed with me after walking through that door. The midnight visitor. My boyfriend Marcus works as a high school teacher about 15 minutes away by subway. He gets home at roughly the same time every day, give or take an hour. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer. In late February of this year, we'd had a pretty serious fight about something I can't even remember now. It was one of those arguments where we didn't speak, text, or call each other for the entire next day. This particular afternoon, I was lying in bed working on my laptop. It was a Wednesday, and I was pretty sure Marcus's first class ended at 1 in the afternoon on Wednesdays, meaning he'd probably be home by 2:30. Around 1 o'clock, I heard the front door open and close. I thought, I guess he's home early today. It was normal for him to skip his last class occasionally, so I didn't think much of it. Honestly, I was mostly preparing mentally for the awkward post-fight conversation we'd have to have. So I stayed in bed, continuing to work, waiting for him to come in and change clothes. The bedroom door was closed, and I had my earbuds in, but only halfway. I could still hear the heavy footsteps of him walking around the apartment. If we hadn't been in the middle of a fight, and I wasn't so focused on the awkwardness of it all, I might have noticed how slow the footsteps were, or how long he spent walking around the living room. But I was caught up in the drama of our argument and didn't pay attention. I just lay there waiting for him to finally come into the bedroom. After what felt like forever, the bedroom door slowly opened, just a few inches. I turned toward the door, ready to give him that awkward, we've been fighting for 24 hours smile. But the door didn't open any wider. I looked and saw a woman's hand with bright red nail polish on the doorknob. However, it was slowly closed the door, just as they'd opened it, without coming into the room. I jumped out of bed, ripped out my earbuds, and froze for a few seconds, my mind racing. My first thought was that wasn't Marcus. Then I wondered if it could have been his mom, his sister, or maybe our landlord for some reason. But I quickly realized his mom and sister don't have keys and have never come over unannounced. The landlord has never entered without permission. This was a complete stranger. I ran back into the bedroom and locked the door, shaking uncontrollably. There's a small balcony connected to our bedroom, so despite the cold February weather, I stepped outside and called Marcus. He answered, and I asked if his mom or sister might have come over unexpectedly. He said, "No, don't move, I'm calling the police." The police arrived within minutes and searched the entire apartment. Of course, no one was there by that point. The strange thing was, nothing was missing. Despite us keeping a jar full of cash right by the entrance, nothing was even touched. It seemed like the intruder had come straight to the bedroom, seen me in bed, panicked, and left. Plus, you can't open that heavy wooden front door without a key. For a few days, Marcus and I were convinced it was just our landlord being nosy. I started feeling better about it, but we demanded that she change the locks anyway. When she came to change them with her husband, they made a discovery. There was a scratched area around the keyhole that looked like someone had used tools to break in. The landlord said, Someone definitely used tools to get into this apartment. A day or two later, Marcus told me, "I have something to tell you, but don't freak out." He'd noticed that our orange kitchen scissors were missing. I obviously freaked out. I tore the apartment apart looking for those scissors. It's been 8 months and they're still gone. The whole thing is just creepy and bizarre. A stranger breaks into a nice apartment but doesn't take anything valuable. Not even the money sitting right by the entrance. They take scissors from the kitchen, go straight to the bedroom, see someone in bed, and immediately leave. I never got to see the person who opened that door, and I hope I never do. The attic dweller. This happened last December while my teenage daughter Emma and I were alone during a particularly heavy snowstorm. I'm writing this because I still wake up some nights, heart pounding, convinced I hear footsteps again coming from above. I live in a quiet neighborhood in upstate New York. It's just me and Emma. My husband died in a car accident 3 years ago. It was devastating, but we were slowly finding our footing again. I work from home as a web developer, so I'm usually around most of the time. This particular evening, it had been snowing heavily all day. The snow was so thick that every sound outside was muffled. Emma had gone to bed early after helping me shovel the driveway, and I was in the kitchen finishing up some work around 11 o'clock. The snow was still coming down hard, but there was no wind. Everything was eerily quiet. Around 11:30, I started hearing what sounded like footsteps upstairs. At first, I assumed Emma was just getting up to use the bathroom, so I didn't think anything of it. But then I noticed something strange. The steps didn't sound like they were on the floor. They sounded hollow, like someone was walking above the ceiling. I paused my work and listened more carefully. It wasn't steady walking, more like short, sharp movements, like someone shifting their weight in the attic space. We have one of those pull-down ladders that leads to the attic, and the access panel is right in the upstairs hallway, just outside Emma's room. I turned off the kitchen light and crept upstairs, trying to keep my steps quiet so I wouldn't wake Emma if this really was nothing. But as soon as I reached the top step, I heard it again. Creak, tap, scrape. It was definitely coming from the attic. I stopped dead, my heart hammering in my chest. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a squirrel got in, or a bird somehow. But then something happened that made me nearly fall backward down the stairs. The attic panel shifted. I mean, it visibly lifted about an inch or two, enough that I could see a sliver of darkness beyond the wood, and then it dropped back down with a dull thud. I was frozen. There was no wind, no storm, just a still, snowy night. Nothing should have been strong enough to lift that panel. And while I stood there paralyzed, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I jumped so hard I nearly screamed. It was a text from my neighbor Linda, who lives 3 houses down. "Hey, are you guys okay? I saw a man walking up your driveway about 15 minutes ago. Thought it was odd since it's so late." My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen or heard anyone at the front of the house, and I'd been in the kitchen with a clear view of the driveway. I'd heard nothing. I quickly texted back, "No visitors here." "Just me and Emma. Can you see anything now?" No response. "Nothing visible now," she replied. My hands were shaking. I backed slowly down the stairs, not taking my eyes off that access panel. I locked the downstairs closet door, which is where the bottom of the attic ladder would extend when pulled down. Then I went to the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife I could find. Maybe it was stupid, but I crept back upstairs and quietly opened Emma's door. She was fast asleep, completely unaware. Thank God. I pulled her door shut and went into my own room across the hall. I locked my bedroom door, sat on the floor with my back against it, phone in one hand, knife in the other, and just listened. Silence. My phone buzzed again. "Linda, just checked outside. There are fresh footprints in the snow. They come around the back of your house and then just stop, like they disappeared. Want me to call the police?" I didn't answer right away because, at that moment, something else happened. The attic panel shifted again. But this time, it didn't just lift and fall. It lifted, paused, then settled slightly off-kilter. I could hear the faintest shuffling, like something was moving very slowly up there, trying not to be heard. That's when I lost it. I called Linda back and whispered, "Yes, call the police." She said she was already on it and would come over with her husband David, who's ex-military. They arrived about 10 minutes later, knocking on my front door and calling my name. I ran down, let them in, and told them what had happened. David didn't hesitate. We pulled down the attic ladder, he grabbed a flashlight, and climbed up while Linda and I stood back with Emma, who had finally woken up during all the commotion. He was up there for maybe 3 minutes, and we heard him call down, "You're not going to believe this." There was someone in the attic, but they weren't there anymore. There was a sleeping bag, food wrappers, a nearly empty water bottle, and even a paperback book. There was also a small pile of dirty clothes and what looked like a battery-powered space heater. In the corner, near the far end of the attic, the insulation had been pulled aside, revealing a small opening that led to the crawl space above the neighbor's garage. A loose board had been pushed aside, like someone had escaped that way. The police came about 20 minutes later and checked all the surrounding properties. No sign of whoever it was. We later figured out that whoever had been living in my attic had probably been there for at least a few days. My husband used to store old boxes up there, and I hadn't been up in months. There was enough food, mostly granola bars, bottled water, and canned soup, to suggest they'd prepared for an extended stay. The police checked all the locks on the windows and believed the intruder got in through the garage, which I don't use much. Apparently, this isn't as uncommon as you'd think. Attic squatters, they called it. We've since installed cameras, outdoor motion lights, and a house alarm. The attic panel now locks from below, and we had the garage secured with metal reinforcements. It could have been much worse. But the thought that some stranger had been crouched just above our heads for days, listening, waiting, while Emma and I went about our lives. It terrifies and enrages me. Emma still sleeps with the light on sometimes. I don't blame her. I won't lie, I still panic most nights, but now I'm mostly filled with anger. I feel much safer knowing the house is secure, and the thought of some creep lurking above my daughter. Let's just say he'd better hope I never run into him. This happened about 6 months ago, and I still can't shake how bizarre it all became. I'm not lying when I say I was genuinely scared for my safety. After a bunch of disappointing dates, I was getting tired of the whole dating app scene. But then I came across Derek's profile on Bumble. He looked like a regular guy, brown hair, friendly smile, and he mentioned he was into hiking and true crime podcasts. I thought we might actually have something to talk about beyond the usual. What do you do for work? Small talk. So I swiped right and sent him a message about the podcast thing. To my surprise, he responded quickly and seemed normal. We messaged back and forth for a few days, and it felt natural. No red flags or weird pressure. We set up a date for Friday night at this cozy coffee shop downtown. I got there early, nervously sipping my latte and hoping I didn't look completely awkward. He walked in right on time, looking exactly like his pictures. We started chatting, and honestly, it was one of the better first dates I'd had in months. We talked about books, movies, random stuff, the kind of conversation that makes you think, yeah, maybe this could actually go somewhere. After coffee, we decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. The streets were quiet, just a little chilly for October. I was feeling good about the evening. But then we passed this dimly lit alley, and Derek suddenly stopped. "You hear that?" he asked, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. I listened carefully, but didn't hear anything besides normal city sounds, distant traffic, maybe a dog barking a few blocks away. Probably nothing, I said, but I could tell something had shifted in him. That's when the night started feeling less normal. We kept walking, but Derek was tense now. I was thinking maybe he was just cold or nervous, but the whole vibe had definitely changed. We stuck to the main street, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Out of nowhere, Derek grabbed my arm and whispered, "Look." I glanced over my shoulder toward the alley he pointed at. There was a guy there tall, wearing a dark hoodie pulled way down so his face was hidden in shadows. He was just standing there, completely motionless, like he was waiting for something. I was trying not to freak out while also not wanting to make a scene. Derek was staring at the guy too, his eyes narrowed with this intense focus I hadn't seen before. "Maybe we should just cross the street," I suggested. He nodded quickly, and we hurried across like two idiots. But then this guy suddenly stepped out from the alley and started walking toward us. My heart was pounding, and I was already thinking about running. But Derek grabbed my hand and pulled me into a nearby convenience store before the guy could get too close. Inside, we tried to act casual while watching through the window as the guy stopped, looked around, and then disappeared back into the alley. We didn't say much after that. We finished the night quickly. Derek insisted on walking me back to my car, but we avoided the dark streets and kept to the busiest routes. When I got home, I told myself it was just some random creep, nothing to stress about. But the whole thing stuck with me. It was like the guy was waiting for Derek specifically, not me. I asked Derek about it the next day, and he just said, "I've had some bad luck with weird guys before. I didn't want to freak you out." That should have been my cue to walk away. A couple days after that night, I was still thinking about the guy in the alley. Derek had been texting me like normal, but then weird stuff started happening. At first, it was small things like a message from an unknown number. No text, just a picture of the alley where the guy had been standing. No caption, nothing. I asked Derek if he knew anything about it. He just shrugged it off, said it was probably spam or some prank. But then the messages kept coming, every day, sometimes twice a day. Pictures of places Derek had told me about, places I hadn't been to, but recognized from his stories. A photo of the coffee shop he mentioned loving. Another of his favorite park bench. The last one was a selfie of Derek, except it was taken without his knowledge, from a distance, like someone had been watching him. I told Derek about those messages, and his face went pale. He said he'd been feeling like someone was watching him for a while, but he didn't want to tell me until he was sure he wasn't just being paranoid. Then things got worse. One night, I got a text from Derek's number. "I need help," just that. I tried calling, but he didn't pick up. I messaged him back asking if he was okay, but no response. I was freaking out, pacing around my apartment at 2 in the morning, trying to figure out what to do. Finally, I decided to drive over to his place. When I got there, the door was slightly ajar. That's when I realized this wasn't just some random creep anymore. This was serious, and Derek was in real trouble. I wasn't thinking straight. I just barged inside, calling out Derek's name, hoping he'd answer. The place was eerily quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Then I heard it, a faint shuffling sound coming from the bedroom. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I crept down the hallway, trying not to make a sound. When I peeked into the room, it was dark except for the glow of Derek's phone on the floor, screen cracked, showing a bunch of messages from the unknown number. And then I saw him, the guy from the alley, standing by the window, looking like he was about to slip out. He hadn't noticed me yet, I didn't think. I yelled, "Hey, get out of here." He froze for a second, then bolted for the door. I chased him outside, but he disappeared into the night. I went back inside and found Derek hiding in the closet. He was shaking, tears streaming down his face. He said the guy had broken in, tried to grab his phone, and he'd locked himself in there. We called the police and waited together, both of us still shaking. The cops came, took our statements, dusted for prints, and told us they'd increase patrols in the neighborhood. They even suggested Derek change his number and tighten up his social media privacy. I stayed with Derek that night. He couldn't sleep, just kept replaying everything over and over. It felt surreal, like some twisted nightmare. We went through his messages together. I found out the guy had been texting Derek even before we met. He'd sent some really disturbing stuff, like he knew where Derek was before Derek even mentioned it online. He was obsessed, and the whole thing had been escalating slowly. Derek kept apologizing, saying he should have told me more about what he'd been dealing with. I told him none of this was his fault. None of it. Over the next few weeks, the police kept us updated. They found the guy living in a halfway house, but his phone was destroyed, probably trying to cover his tracks. They said if he came near Derek again, it would be a felony. The whole thing changed how I see online dating. I'm usually pretty careful, but this made me realize how easy it is for people to stalk and manipulate others, and how quickly things can go from casual to dangerous. Derek and I are still talking, but we're taking things very slow. We both needed time to heal and feel safe again. So yeah, if you're ever on dating apps, please be careful. Trust your gut. If someone seems off or too intense, don't hesitate to block and report. And if something feels wrong, don't ignore it. The locked door. This happened a few years ago, but it still rattles me to think about it. I'm not exaggerating when I say it felt like something out of a psychological thriller. I'm sharing this partly because I still get weird feelings about it sometimes, and partly as a heads up to anyone who gets that gut feeling that something's off. Please trust it for background. I met this guy Trevor on Tinder. He seemed decent enough, charming, well-spoken, funny in that dry, sarcastic way that I usually like. He had a good job in finance, his own place in a nice neighborhood. No obvious red flags that I could see. We started dating maybe once or twice a week, and he always seemed normal. Not overly pushy, not too intense, no love bombing. If anything, he was a little reserved, which I actually appreciated. I thought maybe he was just introverted. After about a month of this, he invited me to stay over for the first time. I'd been to his place before for dinner once, but never stayed overnight. We hung out on a Friday night, cooked dinner together. Well, he cooked while I offered to help, and he said, "No, just relax, watched a movie, cuddled, and went to bed." Nothing weird. If anything, I remember texting a friend saying it felt like a turning point, like maybe we were becoming something more serious. The next morning, and this is where it gets insane, he gets up early for work while I was still off that day. He gets dressed and tells me to just sleep in and relax. "You can hang here as long as you want. I'll be back by 5. "Okay, thanks. I might just chill for a bit then head out," I replied. "No need, just stay inside," he said, smiling. Didn't really register at the time. I was groggy, still half asleep. He kissed me goodbye and left. About an hour later, I was fully awake, made some coffee, and decided I'd just go home, take a shower, and get on with my day. As I went to open the front door, well, it wouldn't open. I figured maybe it was stuck, so I pulled a bit harder, and eventually, to my complete disbelief, realized it was locked. Obviously, this struck me as strange. I tried the deadbolt and door handle, neither would budge. I went to the back door, also locked. Door into the garage, same thing. This is where I began to feel genuinely panicked. I looked around the house for maybe a spare key, but I noticed some key hooks in the front room, and they were empty. Okay, so this was getting weird. I was finding it harder to rationalize that this was a mistake on Trevor's part, and I was scared. I just wanted out, so I tried a few windows. Some had screws drilled into the frames, and the rest were the crank-open kind that wouldn't open wide enough for a person to fit through. I started thinking maybe I'd missed something. Maybe there was a key or a code I didn't know about. I knew I had little choice but to text him. "Hey, I think I'm locked in. I can't open the front door," I messaged. His reply came 5 minutes later. "Yeah, I locked it before I left. Just stay inside. You're not allowed to go out when I'm not home." Excuse me, what? I stared at that message like it was written in another language. Not allowed to go out? Who says that to a grown adult? I genuinely thought it was a joke at first, like maybe he meant it in a haha, just stay safe kind of way. I responded, "Are you serious? I need to leave." No reply. I called him, no answer. Left a voicemail. Waited 10 minutes, called again. Nothing. I started to panic, like legitimate heart racing, full body sweat panic. I realized I was completely alone in a house I could not get out of. I checked every possible exit again. This wasn't just oops, I accidentally locked the door on my way out. No, this was intentional. He had used actual keys to lock every exterior door and then taken the keys with him. I was locked inside like a pet. At this point, I was freaking out. I don't know his neighbors, I don't have their numbers, and I didn't want to draw attention by banging on windows. I couldn't climb out without breaking something, and I didn't know if I'd even be able to do that without getting hurt. He lived in a raised ranch, and the windows were small and high up. Eventually, I found a tiny toolkit in a laundry cabinet. I kid you not, I pried the frame off one of the side doors until I could slide the bolt back. It took me almost an hour. My hands were shaking, and I was honestly scared he might come back before I got it open. When I finally got the door loose and slipped out, I felt like I'd just escaped a hostage situation. I ran down the driveway and didn't stop until I was at the end of the block. I called a friend, told her everything, and stayed at her place for the next 2 days while I processed what had just happened. I blocked Trevor immediately on everything. He never tried to contact me again, which almost makes it creepier, like he either realized how messed up it was or maybe just didn't care. I still don't know what his endgame was. Control, some delusional fantasy about protecting me, or something darker. I reported the incident to the police because I was afraid he would do this to other women. I remember being so embarrassed at the time that I had found myself in that situation. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't my fault and it wasn't normal. The officer told me it was a serious offense and they would follow up. I'm still deciding whether to press charges because I really don't want to see him again. I know it's the right thing to do, but I'm scared. If you take nothing else from this, let it be this. Whether you've known them for 4 days, 4 months, or 4 years, if someone tells you you're not allowed to do something basic like leave a house, that's not love. That's control. That's dangerous. Even if they seem perfectly normal, trust yourself when something feels off. The bathroom foil. This happened to me a while back, and honestly, I'm still kind of creeped out thinking about it. I met this guy Jason on Hinge. We'd been chatting for a couple of weeks. He seemed normal enough, a bit quirky, but funny. When he said he was visiting my city for work, we decided to meet up at my apartment since it was late and I didn't want to go out again. I thought it would be chill. From the moment I opened the door, something felt off. Jason smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that made your skin crawl, like he was hiding some kind of secret. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I was just nervous. He kept making these weird remarks about how perfect my skin looked, but then said something like, "It's a shame all that beauty is just surface level. I bet there's a darker side hiding underneath. Everyone has one." I should have kicked him out right there, but I wasn't prepared for the confrontation. I stupidly told myself it was a compliment that came out way too creepy. When I finally did suggest he leave, mentioning that I had an early start, he seemed reluctant. He asked if he could crash on my couch because he'd missed the last train. I didn't want to be rude, so I agreed, but I locked my bedroom door before going to sleep. Something told me to. Around midnight, I started hearing noises, footsteps, shuffling, like someone was moving around in my apartment. I froze. There was knocking at my bedroom door. It was Jason. He said he needed help with something, but I just didn't feel safe opening up. My gut screamed at me to stay put, so I ignored him. Morning came, and I cautiously checked the place. Jason was gone, but my bathroom was covered in aluminum foil. I mean the entire bathroom walls, sink, even the toilet. I still don't know why. It was like some weird prank or sign that he'd invaded my space way more than I realized. I was terrified for days. Changed my phone number, but every noise made me jump. I reported it to the police, but since nothing was broken or stolen, they said there wasn't much they could do. It's been months since, and I'm really careful about who I let in, even if they seem nice online. Lesson learned the hard way: trust your gut and never invite someone you barely know into your home. After that night, I felt like I couldn't even be alone in my own home. I kept thinking, what if he'd come back? What if he'd done something worse? The foil in my bathroom felt like a weird warning, or just proof that he had no respect for boundaries. I started changing my daily routines, coming home during daylight, asking friends to stay over. I even installed a little security camera by my front door. The paranoia was real. Every time my phone rang or I heard a knock, my heart jumped out of my chest. I told a couple of close friends what happened, and they were shocked. Some urged me to file a police report, but I told them I already had. I've since blocked him everywhere: social media, phone, messaging apps. He tried messaging me a couple times afterward from different numbers, but I ignored and blocked those too. The worst part was realizing how wrong my initial judgment was. He seemed okay online, but in person, he was a totally different person: dark, invasive, and borderline dangerous. Honestly, it took me months to feel somewhat normal again. I started going to therapy, which really helped me process the anxiety and fear. I learned to trust my instincts more and to set firm boundaries. Now, whenever I hear someone say, meet online, then invite them over, I cringe. Sure, it can be safe, but only if you really know the person. I learned the hard way that no matter how nice someone seems while texting, you really can't know their true self until you meet in a public space. And even then, stay alert. I'm sharing this because I want others to be careful and listen to their gut. Creepy vibes aren't just in movies, they're real, and they can happen to anyone. The gang connection. This all started a little over 2 years ago when I matched with this girl named Isabella on Bumble. At first, it was pretty normal, casual chats, flirting, you know how dating apps go. Isabella was smart, funny, and honestly out of my league, but she was interested and I was excited. We met at this small burger place downtown. Nothing fancy, but I thought it was casual enough to break the ice without making things awkward. Isabella was cool, easy to talk to, a little mysterious, but in a way that made me want to know more. She mentioned almost immediately that she'd just gotten out of a rough relationship about a week prior. She didn't want to go into details, and I respected that, but there was this slight edge to her that I couldn't ignore, like she was carrying around some invisible weight. We ended up going to a couple of bars after the restaurant. Nothing wild, just places where the music was loud enough to drown out any awkward silences. She drank a bit more than me, which was unusual for me, but I figured maybe she was trying to loosen up after what sounded like a tough breakup. At the end of the night, I drove her home. That's where things started to get weird. After dropping Isabella off, I started to head home. At first, everything seemed normal, but then I noticed this beat-up black SUV keeping pace behind me. No matter which way I turned, it was there. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was someone else heading home or a coincidence. But as the blocks ticked by, the car stayed on my tail. I got this sinking feeling in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. I didn't want to freak out, so I called Isabella. She sounded tense and said, "Don't go home yet, I'll call you back." I started driving in circles, going past 2 police stations just to be safe, trying to lose the SUV without making any sudden moves that might escalate the situation. About 20 minutes later, Isabella called back. Her voice was low, serious, and I could tell she was scared. She said, "Okay, you can go home now, but just act normal. Don't do anything weird." That advice felt like a bad joke at the time. Act normal, when I'm pretty sure some guy is tailing me because of her ex. Still, I headed to my apartment complex, hoping that things would calm down. When I pulled into my complex, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were about 20 to 25 people hanging around the entrance, mostly Latino guys, some with visible tattoos, others just looking menacing as hell. They weren't exactly what I'd call friendly neighbors. Isabella's cousin was there, someone she'd warned me about before. It was involved with a local gang, and from the stories she'd told me in bits and pieces, this guy wasn't someone to mess with. Then there was her older brother, the guy who didn't belong to the gang but clearly commanded respect from everyone there. I froze, heart pounding. I hadn't met any of these people before, and suddenly it felt like I was stuck in the middle of something way over my head. The brother caught my eye and said casually, "Hey man, how you holding up? You're good. Just come inside." I didn't argue. I got inside as quickly as I could and locked the door behind me, but the group didn't leave. For the next 4 hours, I could hear their voices outside my door and in the parking lot. It felt like a silent stakeout, like I was under some kind of protective but terrifying watch. I tried not to panic, pacing my apartment, trying to make sense of what was happening. At 2 in the morning, there was a knock on my door. It was Isabella's brother. "That shouldn't happen again," he said flatly. "You understand," I nodded, not trusting my voice. They left after that, but the whole night stuck with me. The fear, the silence, the weight of those eyes outside my door. The morning after that nightmare, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My head was pounding, my hands were still shaking from adrenaline, and I couldn't stop replaying everything in my head. I texted Isabella first thing. She answered quickly, but her texts were short and tight. I could tell she was rattled. "Hey, last night. Thanks for the warning," I said in a message. "That was way more intense than I expected." "Yeah, sorry I didn't tell you everything before. I didn't want to scare you off," she replied. "I get it, but man, I was seriously scared. It felt like I was in a movie or something," I said back. She finally opened up a bit more over text, telling me about how her ex had gotten deeper into gang stuff over the last few years, how the breakup had triggered some seriously ugly retaliation, and how her family was involved trying to protect her. In the days after, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder. Every unfamiliar car, every shadow outside my window had me on edge. Isabella noticed, and it made her feel guilty. We ended up having some rough conversations, me trying to understand what she'd been through, and her dealing with the guilt of what her ex had done to both of us. At one point, I asked her if she thought this could end with violence. She was honest, saying it was possible, but the family had set boundaries, tough boundaries, and they were serious about keeping both of us safe. I appreciated that honesty, but it was hard to shake the feeling that danger was lurking just around the corner. After that night, everything changed between Isabella and me. The fear and tension didn't just vanish. If anything, it got heavier. We talked a lot in the days that followed, but the more I learned about what she was still dealing with, the more I realized how much her past was still controlling her life. Her family was protective, sure, but the presence of those gang members hanging around my place, it wasn't just a one-time thing. It felt like a warning, a constant shadow. I tried to be patient, but I couldn't help feeling trapped. I wanted a normal relationship, one where I didn't have to look over my shoulder or worry about getting caught in someone else's dangerous world. Isabella was incredible, no doubt about that. But I started to see how much this whole situation was taking a toll on her too. She was exhausted, scared, and honestly a little broken from everything. One night, after a long conversation that ended with both of us crying, we agreed that maybe we weren't the right people for each other. Not yet, at least. She needed to heal without dragging someone else into the chaos. I needed to protect myself. We parted on decent terms, promising to check in with each other down the road. I moved out of that apartment a few months later. It wasn't easy leaving her behind, but I knew it was the safest thing to do for both of us. Sometimes I wonder how things might have been different if I'd known about her ex and the gang stuff from the start. Maybe I wouldn't have gotten involved at all. But then again, maybe I would have missed out on meeting someone who was so resilient and real. If anything, that experience taught me to be careful and to listen to the red flags. I hope Isabella is doing okay now, wherever she is. I hope she's safe and healing. And for anyone reading this who's on dating apps, watch your back, trust your instincts, and don't ignore the things that feel off, no matter how good someone seems. This happened when I was a kid back in the late 70s. It's something I never really thought much about until I got older, but looking back now, it was definitely one of the creepiest things I've ever experienced. We lived in a small suburban neighborhood, and it was a different time. You know, the back door was usually unlocked. Kids played outside without anyone worrying too much, and you could leave your car running for a minute without thinking twice. It wasn't unheard of for neighbors to just pop in unannounced, especially if they were friendly or lived next door. But this one neighbor, he was a bit off, shall we say. His name was Ralph. He lived 3 houses down and was always hanging around in his front yard, waving at people, always way too friendly. But he had this weird habit of just walking into our house. I'm talking about walking in like it was his own home. No knocking, no waiting for someone to answer. He just let himself in. And sometimes he wouldn't even announce himself. This wasn't a one-time thing. At the time, I never thought my parents were too bothered by it. They didn't really speak to me about it, and it wasn't until years later that I understood how weird and invasive that behavior actually was. The most bizarre incident, though, happened one afternoon when my dad was in the garage. My dad had been working on the car all morning. I was in my room, probably playing with my action figures or reading a comic book, when I heard the back door creak open. The latch clicked, and then I heard footsteps, heavy ones. I didn't think much of it at first, just assuming my dad had come back inside. They didn't sound exactly like his footsteps, though. Then I heard my dad's voice, loud and sharp, like he was talking to someone he didn't expect. "Ralph, what the hell are you doing here?" I rushed into the hallway to see what was going on, and that's when I saw him. Ralph was standing in the middle of our living room, casually leaning against the armrest of the couch, sipping a can of beer, our beer. My dad was in the doorway from the garage, wearing his work clothes and looking completely stunned. There was this weird tension in the air, like neither of them knew what to do next. My dad's face was a mixture of confusion, frustration, and just a touch of anger. Ralph didn't even flinch. He just stayed there unbothered, like it was normal to just walk into someone's house while they weren't home. He gave my dad a half smile and said something like, "Hey, just thought I'd drop by and see how you were doing." At that point, my dad was already trying to wrap his head around it. He didn't shout or raise his voice, but he definitely wasn't happy. I remember my dad talking to him for a few minutes, trying to get Ralph to leave, but Ralph didn't seem fazed by any of it. He just hung out, chatting about the weather or the neighborhood stuff that should have been small talk, but just felt weird and awkward. My dad, looking more uncomfortable by the second, eventually had to walk into the living room to escort him out. It was the most bizarre and awkward interaction, and I remember standing there, not fully understanding what was happening, but knowing it was definitely not normal. Ralph eventually left, waving like he was leaving a party, and my dad locked the door behind him. I could tell my dad was shaken up, but he didn't say much to me about it at the time. He just told me to let him or Mom know if Ralph came by, and if I was alone, to go to Mrs. Patterson's house, another one of our neighbors. A few weeks later, I noticed my dad started installing a fence around the backyard with a locked gate. It wasn't until I was much older, after I'd moved out, that my dad finally told me the real reason for that fence. He said that after that day, he realized that Ralph had been popping by unannounced for months, sometimes when my parents weren't home. The beer had been disappearing much quicker than he'd expected, and at one point, my mom had accused my dad of drinking too much. My dad asked Ralph how often he stopped by. Ralph admitted he would just walk right in, checking out the kitchen, or sitting on the couch like he was at his own house. After that incident, when I was alone in the house, my dad decided it had to stop. That's when the fence went up. It wasn't for privacy or for the dog. It was because my dad wanted to make sure Ralph couldn't just waltz in anymore. He was starting to get seriously unsettled by Ralph's complete lack of boundaries. My parents never told me how bad it really was. They didn't want us kids to worry, so we just assumed it was all fine and normal. But looking back, it was so creepy. I can't imagine just walking into someone's house whenever I felt like it, let alone staying in their living room like I was an invited guest. We eventually moved away, and I have no idea what happened to Ralph after that. I'll never forget how normal it all seemed at the time, and my naivety about it. Now, as an adult, I look back and think about all the ways it could have ended differently. The bedroom window. This happened when I was around 13, so this was in the early 2000s. We lived in a pretty typical middle-class neighborhood, quiet, safe, not the kind of place where anything dramatic usually happened. It was early evening, probably around 6 or so. I was home after school, watching TV in the living room, and my mom was in the dining room folding laundry. The sun had just started to set, but it was still light outside. Just a normal, quiet evening. And someone knocked on the front door. Not a light knock, more like someone trying to get our attention quickly. It wasn't aggressive, but it was enough to make both of us stop what we were doing. My mom checked the peephole and didn't recognize the guy. She told me to be quiet and not to make any noise. I asked her who it was, and she said, "No idea. We're not opening it." She was always cautious about things like that, especially when my dad wasn't home. The guy knocked a few more times, waited a bit, then nothing. We assumed he left, but a minute later we heard the gate on the side of the house swing open. That's when my mom got serious. Our gate wasn't locked, just latched, and it wouldn't stop someone who was really determined. She told me to go to the hallway and keep out of sight. Then she walked quickly to her bedroom and came back with her handgun. She wasn't someone who bragged about owning one. It was just something she kept in case something ever went wrong. This felt like one of those times. She went to the kitchen, where the back door was, and caught the guy standing right outside. He was trying the door handle and peering through the glass. She told me later she saw him pull something from his pocket, maybe a screwdriver or something similar, and raise it toward the glass like he was about to try breaking in. Right then, she opened the door just enough so he could see her and the weapon in her hand. He didn't say anything. He didn't either. He looked at her, froze, and then turned and ran straight out of the gate and down the street. She called the police and gave a description, but by the time they got there, he was long gone. We figured that was the end of it, but the next day we got a call from a police officer. The same guy had broken into another house not far from us later that night. He tried getting in through a window, slipped, and injured his leg. That's how they caught him. Turns out he had a record. Nothing violent as far as we heard, but a string of break-ins, and he'd served time before. The officer said he probably wasn't targeting us specifically, just looking for houses that seemed empty. We never had another incident like that, but I still think about it sometimes. My mom stayed calm and acted quickly. If she hadn't seen him when she did, who knows how far he would have gotten. The intruder's bite. This happened when I was a teenager, probably around 16 or 17. I was spending the night at my best friend's place, and what happened that night has never totally made sense to either of us. We still talk about it sometimes, just trying to figure out what the hell that guy was doing there or who he even was. My friend Danny lived in a 2-story house with his mom and younger sister. That night, it was just the two of us and his mom home. His little sister was staying with their grandmother, and his mom had gone to bed early. We were downstairs watching movies and eating junk food like we always did when I stayed over. I don't remember what time it was when we finally went to sleep, but it was definitely late, past midnight for sure. We were both sleeping on couches in the living room. It was dark, and the only light came from one of those dim night lights in the kitchen. I'm a light sleeper, and at some point in the middle of the night, I woke up because I heard what sounded like the front door creaking. I thought maybe it was Danny's mom getting up or something, but then I saw movement near the front of the room. There was a guy standing in the hallway, a silhouette against the kitchen light, so I couldn't make out much detail. Just that he was an adult, wearing a dark hoodie or jacket, and he was standing completely still, like he was trying to figure out if we were asleep. I froze. I didn't know if I was dreaming or not at first, and I didn't want to wake Danny in case I was just being paranoid. But then the guy took a step forward into the room, and I saw him more clearly. He looked surprised, like he hadn't expected anyone to be there. And then Danny stirred. He must have sensed something too, because he sat up and said, "Who the hell are you?" That's when everything went sideways. The guy lunged toward Danny without saying a word. It was this weird, panicked moment where no one knew what was happening. Danny tried to stand up and push him off, and I jumped to my feet too, but I didn't know what to do. He was already on top of Danny, grabbing at his arm. Then the guy bit him. Hard. Danny screamed, not just yelled, he screamed. I pulled the guy off as best I could, and as soon as I did, he bolted straight out the door. Gone before we could even register what had just happened. Whole thing was maybe 30 seconds from start to finish. We locked the door immediately after, turned on every light in the house, and woke Danny's mom up. She called the police and took Danny to urgent care. The bite was bad. He needed multiple stitches and antibiotics, but thankfully he healed up fine eventually. The police came and took a report, but they never figured out who the guy was. No prints, no signs of forced entry. It's possible the door was unlocked. We honestly don't remember. The only description we could give was vague. Adult male, dark clothes, medium build, maybe in his 30s. It all happened so fast. We never saw him again. Nothing else like that ever happened in that neighborhood as far as we know. The cops thought it might have been a drug thing or someone confusing the house for somewhere else. Maybe he thought it was empty and was trying to steal something. Or maybe he was just off his rocker. It's the fact that we don't know that still unsettles me. Who breaks into a house, sees 2 teenagers sleeping in the living room, and the first thing they do is attack one of them and bite him. The whole thing has faded into that strange, blurry part of memory where it feels like a bad dream. Until Danny shows me the scar on his forearm, and I remember the police report that proves it wasn't. The Key Keeper. This happened in 2003 when I was 11 years old, living with my mom and younger brother in a small town in upstate New York. We were renting the top floor of a converted 2-family house just on the edge of a wooded area. Quiet place, too quiet sometimes. My mom was a nurse who worked long shifts at the local hospital. On some early evenings, she'd leave me in charge for an hour or two while she picked up groceries or covered for another nurse. I'd watch my 6-year-old brother Tommy, and we'd play video games or watch cartoons until she got back. This one afternoon felt like any other. Late autumn, cold but no snow yet. Tommy and I had just finished our after-school snacks and were parked in front of the TV. My mom had gone to help an elderly neighbor down the road who'd fallen on their stairs. She told me she'd be 15 minutes max. Around 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. We almost never got visitors. I froze. Tommy looked at me, confused. Now, to be clear, we lived on the upper floor, and the main front door was downstairs at the bottom of the stairs that led up to our apartment. It was an old wooden door with a bolt lock and a big glass panel covered by a curtain. If you wanted to come up to our part, you'd ring the bell outside, wait for us to buzz you in, and then come up the stairs. So hearing the bell was odd, especially since we weren't expecting anyone. I stood up slowly and peeked out of our kitchen window, which had a partial view of the gravel driveway below. No car, no bike, just a tall man standing completely still in front of the downstairs door. He was wearing a long, dark coat and thick, round glasses that made his eyes look cartoonishly big. I remember that detail clearly. He was also holding something rolled up in his hand. At the time, I thought it was a newspaper. He didn't ring the bell again, just stood there, staring. I ducked back out of view, heart pounding. I don't know why I was instantly so freaked out, but every instinct I had was telling me not to answer. Then I heard the sound that still makes my stomach turn to this day. The sound of the downstairs door creaking open. That door was locked. I was sure of it. I rushed to the hallway and peeked down the inside staircase. The man was on the steps. He was already inside the house. I didn't move. I just stood there in my socks on the wooden floor, trying to figure out what to do. I couldn't even hear him walking, but I could see the shadow he cast on the walls as he slowly climbed toward our floor. Then he stopped. I couldn't see his face anymore, just the top of his head. And then I heard it. He said my name. Kevin, he said. Just said it calmly, softly, like he'd known me for years. Then again, Kevin, it's okay. Can you open the door? I nearly screamed. My little brother had heard it too. He ran into the hallway and asked who it was. I put my hand over his mouth and pulled him back into the living room. I didn't say anything. I just dragged him behind the couch and motioned for him to be silent. From where we sat, we couldn't see the stairs anymore, but we could hear everything. He walked all the way up and just stood there. And then he tried again. You don't have to be scared, Kevin. Your mom sent me. That's what did it. That sentence. He said it so matter-of-factly, like it was a normal thing. I reached from behind the couch and grabbed the cordless phone. I dialed my mom's number. She didn't answer. I called our neighbor, the same one my mom was helping. He picked up. I whispered, "Is my mom still there?" "Yeah, she just left." "Why?" he said. That's when I completely broke. "There's a man at our door. He's in the house. He said Mom sent him." I didn't realize how loud I was. I think the man heard me because just then the doorknob rattled. Not forcefully, just once, like he was checking if it was locked. Then everything went quiet. 5 seconds, 10, a full minute. I waited for something, anything. Then the front door slammed shut, hard enough that the windows shook. I crept to the top of the stairs and peeked down. He was gone. I could see the downstairs door swinging slightly where it hadn't fully latched. My mom came home less than 5 minutes later. I was hysterical. To her credit, she believed me right away. She called the police, and they came to check things out. Here's the part that gets worse. The lock on the downstairs door wasn't broken. It had been unlocked with a key. No signs of forced entry. The police asked if we'd recently lost any keys or given copies to anyone. We hadn't, but the landlord's handyman, who lived in the basement apartment and helped maintain the building, did have a spare set in case of emergencies. The landlord said the handyman had been out of town that week and hadn't told anyone to visit. The man I saw was never identified. No matching description, no one found on the property. They thought I maybe misunderstood something. I know what I saw. I know he used a real key. I know he said my name. And I know he wanted to get inside without forcing it, like he was hoping I'd be the one to let him in. We moved out a few months later. I've never seen that man again, but I still double lock every door, even now as an adult. And anytime someone says my name from behind a door, I get cold all over again. The red truck. This happened over a decade ago when I was 13 years old. I live in a small town in rural Pennsylvania, and in my neighborhood, the houses are fairly spread apart, separated by patches of woods. It was a school day, so my grandma picked me up from school and brought me home. This was the first year I got dropped off at my house alone. Before this, I would just go to my grandma's house after school. I would get dropped off around 3 in the afternoon, and my parents would be home around 4:30. Not that big of a deal today. For some reason, my dad wasn't going to be home until around 7, and my mom, who's a teacher, wouldn't be home until around 8 because she had parent-teacher conferences at the school. This happened in early fall, so it wouldn't even be dark until like 8:30. I did what I usually did when I got home. I ran upstairs, got on my PlayStation, and played games with my friends online. Today it was just my friend Jake and me. I'd been playing for about 2 hours when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. No one should have been here until like 7. My house is set up so that my upstairs bedroom has windows that look over the driveway. So with my headset on and controller in hand, I went to the window to see who it was. Maybe my dad got home earlier than expected. I looked outside. It was a red pickup truck. No one I know drives a red truck. The person had pulled into the middle of my driveway sideways, kind of like he owned the place. When I looked, I saw a man with a baseball cap wearing a big camouflage hoodie and jeans. It was September, so no one should have been wearing a big hoodie and jeans in Pennsylvania. By the time I looked, he was already almost out of view, going up the walkway to my front door. I thought maybe it was one of my dad's friends or someone my dad hired to do something, but he would usually tell me if someone was going to be coming over. Soon after, I heard a knock at the door, then another. I went to my other window that has a better view of the walkway to the front door. I saw the guy walking back down the walkway. I switched and went back to looking through the windows overlooking the driveway. I'm relaying all of this to Jake, still with my headset on. I told Jake that the guy was walking back to his truck now. Instead, he walked past his truck and tried to open the side door to our garage. At this point, my heart sank. I told Jake that this guy just tried to get into our house. Mind you, it was already past 5 in the afternoon. Luckily, it was locked, but we do sometimes forget to lock it. After he tried the door, he started walking toward our back patio. I dropped my headset and quietly ran downstairs to see what he was doing. I got downstairs and stood against the wall so I wasn't visible from the back door or living room windows. I stood there and listened. I heard him try to open the door. Then I heard a thud. It sounded like he dropped something heavy on the ground or kicked something. At this point, I was more scared than I'd ever been. I wanted to call my parents or grandma, but I didn't have a cell phone yet. The only phone in the house was in the kitchen, and I would have to cross the living room to get there. He would be able to see me if I went in there. A few seconds after the thud, I peeked around the corner and he was gone. I ran back upstairs and put my headset back on, telling Jake that he had just tried to open the back door as well. As I'm telling him this, I heard a car door shut. This time, when I looked out the window, he had finally gotten into his truck. I looked at the truck closer and noticed the only things he had in the truck bed were a crowbar and a shovel. He sat in his truck for what felt like a few minutes. During this time, Jake told me to get my iPod and take a picture of his license plate. He was parked so I couldn't see it. Then he drove backward out of my driveway and down the road. A few minutes after he was confirmed gone, I went downstairs to see what the thud could have been. I got to the back door and saw that the doormat had been moved. Both big plant pots had been moved as well. He was looking for a key. Holy crap. We do have a hidden key back there too. The key to the back door was under one of the smaller plant pots on a ledge near the door, not the biggest one he had checked under. I went to the front porch, and all of the other pots looked like they'd been moved as well. I don't know what I would have done if he had been able to find the key, or if he had just broken in. After he left, I called my dad and told him what had happened. When my dad got home, he had a police officer come over, and I told him what happened. I gave the cop a description of the guy and the truck. That guy never came back. The moment I found the first note, I should have burned it. Pinned to the weathered wooden door of my cabin, the paper fluttered in the chilly Maine wind, its edges curling like it was alive. The words, scrawled in sharp, black ink, hit me like a punch. Are you still running from it? My breath caught, a cold knot tightening in my chest. I stood there, frozen on the porch, the forest around me whispering through the fog that clung to the pines like a shroud. The cabin was supposed to be my escape, my sanctuary from the noise of the city, from the weight of my past. But now it felt like a trap. I'm Emily Woods, a writer who thought a remote cabin in the heart of Maine's wilderness would spark my next thriller. The isolation was perfect, or so I thought. The nearest town, a sleepy place called Haven's End, was 10 miles away, nothing but dense forest and winding dirt roads between me and civilization. I'd been here for 3 weeks, working on my manuscript, when the note appeared. No sender, no explanation, just those words staring up at me. I tore it down, my hands trembling, and scanned the tree line. The fog was thick, swallowing the world beyond a few feet. Nothing moved. No one was there. At least, that's what I told myself. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine and old books, the kind of scent that usually calmed me. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting flickering shadows across the walls, but it couldn't warm the chill that had settled into my bones. I tossed the note into the flames and watched it curl into ash, trying to convince myself it was nothing. A prank from some local kid, maybe. Haven's End was small, and newcomers like me were probably easy targets. But deep down, I knew better. The words were too personal, too sharp. They cut straight to a truth I hadn't spoken aloud in years. A truth I thought I'd buried. I tried to focus on my work, my fingers hovering over the laptop keys, but my mind kept drifting back to the note. Who could have left it? I didn't know anyone here. My only contact was Nathan Gray, the local ranger who'd stopped by a few times to check on the cabin. He was friendly, with a crooked smile and a habit of talking about the forest like it was an old friend. But even Nathan didn't know about my past. No one did, not the full story anyway. The next morning, I found another note. This one was tucked into the mailbox at the end of the gravel path, half hidden under a pile of damp leaves. My heart sank as I unfolded it, the paper cold and slightly wet from the morning dew. You can't outrun what you've done. The words were in the same jagged handwriting, each letter pressing into the paper like it was carved with intent. My pulse quickened. I spun around, my boots crunching on the gravel, half expecting to see someone lurking in the fog. But there was only the endless gray, the trees fading into the mist like ghosts. I stuffed the note into my pocket and hurried back to the cabin, locking the door behind me. The air inside felt heavier now, the walls too close. I paced the small living room, the wooden floor creaking under my steps. My eyes kept darting to the windows, to the fog that pressed against the glass like it was trying to get in. I wanted to call Nathan, to tell him something wasn't right, but what would I say? That I was scared of some notes, that I felt like the forest itself was watching me. He'd think I was losing it. That night I couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and every creak of the cabin sounded like footsteps. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the words from the notes echoing in my mind. Are you still running? You can't outrun what you've done. I'd left my old life behind for a reason. The mistakes, the guilt, the people I'd hurt, they were supposed to stay buried. But now, it felt like they were clawing their way back to the surface. A sharp noise jolted me upright, a low, scraping sound, like something dragging across the porch. My heart pounded, loud enough to drown out the wind. I grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand, its beam cutting through the dark as I crept to the window. The fog was thicker now, a wall of gray that swallowed the world. I couldn't see the porch, couldn't see anything beyond the glass. But the sound came again, deliberate, slow, like someone was out there, waiting. I forced myself to move, my bare feet cold against the floor as I made my way to the door. My hand hovered over the knob, shaking. I didn't want to open it, didn't want to face whatever was out there, but I couldn't just stand here, paralyzed. I turned the lock and pulled the door open, the cold air hitting me like a wave. The porch was empty, the fog so dense it felt like it was breathing. But there, nailed to the railing, was another note. I know who you are. My stomach dropped. I ripped the note free, the paper crumpling in my fist. The handwriting was the same, sharp and angry, but this time there was something else. A faint smudge of red at the corner, like blood or rust. I stumbled back inside, slamming the door and locking it, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the fire, clutching a kitchen knife, every sound from the forest making my heart race. The next day I called Nathan. His truck rumbled up the dirt path by noon, the sound of it a small comfort in the endless fog. He stepped out, his ranger hat tilted back, his eyes scanning the cabin like he could sense something was off. "You okay, Emily?" he asked, his voice warm but cautious. "You sounded spooked on the phone." I showed him the notes, my hands still shaking as I handed them over. His brow furrowed as he read, his fingers tracing the jagged letters. "This ain't right," he muttered, glancing toward the trees. "Kids around here don't pull stuff like this. You sure you didn't tick off someone in town?" "I don't know anyone in town," I said, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. "I came here to get away, Nathan. No one knows me here. No one should know anything." He studied me for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly like he was trying to piece together a puzzle. "All right," he said finally. "I'll check the area, see if I can find any tracks, but you need to be careful. This place, the forest, it's got a way of getting under your skin." He left to scout the perimeter, and I stayed inside, trying to focus on anything but the notes. I opened my laptop, hoping work would ground me, but my eyes kept drifting to the windows. The fog hadn't lifted, and the trees seemed to loom closer, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching through the mist. I told myself it was just my imagination, that the isolation was messing with my head. But then I heard it, a faint whisper, like a voice carried on the wind. It was too soft to make out, but it sent a shiver down my spine. I stood, my heart pounding, and moved to the window. The whisper came again, clearer this time, and my blood ran cold. It sounded like my own voice, echoing from the forest. "Emily, you can't hide." I backed away, my hands trembling, the knife still clutched in my grip. The cabin, once a refuge, now felt like a cage, the walls pressing in closer with every second. When Nathan returned, his face was grim. "No tracks," he said, his voice low. "No sign of anyone, but I found this." He held up a small, tarnished key, rusted at the edges. It was near the creek, half buried in the dirt. "You recognize it?" I shook my head, my throat tight. I didn't recognize it, but the sight of it made my stomach twist. It looked old, like something that had been lost for years. Nathan pocketed the key, his eyes never leaving mine. "I'm staying nearby tonight," he said, "just in case." That night the whispers came again, louder now, circling the cabin like a predator. I sat by the fire, the knife in my lap, my eyes locked on the door. The fog outside was impenetrable, a thick veil that hid whatever was out there. And then I saw it, a shadow moving in the mist just beyond the porch. It was tall, indistinct, but unmistakably there. My breath caught, and I gripped the knife tighter. The shadow lingered for a moment, then vanished, swallowed by the fog. I didn't sleep, I couldn't. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and I swore I heard my name again, spoken in my own voice. By morning, I was a wreck, my nerves frayed, my mind spiraling. I needed answers. I needed to know who was doing this, why they were targeting me. I searched the cabin, tearing through drawers and closets, looking for anything out of place. That's when I found it, a small, dusty box tucked under a loose floorboard in the bedroom. Inside was a photograph, faded and creased, of me and someone I hadn't seen in years. Someone I'd tried to forget. My hands shook as I stared at the photo, memories flooding back. The guilt, the pain, the things I'd done, they were all there, staring back at me. I shoved the box back under the floorboard, my heart racing. How had it gotten here? I hadn't brought it with me. I was sure of it. I called Nathan again, but before he could arrive, I found another note. This one was pinned to the inside of my bedroom door, the handwriting sharper, more desperate. "You thought you could forget. I never will." My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, the note slipping from my fingers. The whispers were back, louder now, coming from inside the cabin. My own voice echoing through the walls. "Emily, I'm here." I grabbed the knife and stumbled to the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the knob. The fog outside was thicker than ever, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine. I stepped onto the porch, my eyes scanning the mist. And there it was again, the shadow standing at the edge of the tree line. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but I could feel its gaze, heavy and unrelenting. I took a step forward, my voice trembling as I called out, "Who are you? What do you want?" The shadow didn't answer. It just stood there, a silhouette in the fog, until it slowly faded away, leaving me alone with the whispers. I turned back to the cabin, my heart pounding in my chest. The door was still open, the darkness inside beckoning. And then I saw it, a new note, pinned to the wall just inside the doorway. The handwriting was different this time, eerily familiar. It was mine. "You can't run from yourself." I stood there frozen, the note trembling in my hand. The whispers grew louder, filling the air, filling my head. My own voice, accusing, relentless. The cabin, the fog, the forest, they were all closing in, and I didn't know if I was running from someone else or from myself. It was late, too late for phone calls. The clock on the kitchen counter read 11:30 at night. Jacob Miller sat at the old oak table in his aunt's creaky house, a half-finished manuscript glowing on his laptop screen. The house, tucked away in a quiet Ohio suburb, was too big for one person, its walls heavy with the musty smell of old wood and forgotten memories. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, their branches scratching at the windows like fingers begging to come in. Jacob rubbed his eyes, tired from hours of writing, when his phone buzzed, sharp and sudden, cutting through the stillness. The screen lit up with an unknown number. No name, just digits. The area code wasn't local, somewhere far off, maybe the West Coast. He frowned. Telemarketers didn't call this late. His gut twisted, a faint unease creeping in. Something about the number felt wrong, like it was staring back at him. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, then tapped to answer. Hello? His voice was low, cautious, swallowed by the quiet of the house. Silence, just a faint hum like distant static. He waited, breath held, expecting a robotic voice-pitching car warranties. But then a voice came through, soft, calm, and chillingly familiar. Do you know who this is, Jacob? His heart skipped. The voice was smooth, almost warm, but it carried a weight that made his skin prickle. He didn't recognize it, not exactly, but it tugged at something deep, like a memory buried under years of dust. Who's this? He asked, sharper now, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. A low chuckle, barely audible, slithered through the line. You've forgotten, haven't you? That's okay. I'll help you remember. Jacob's grip tightened on the phone. The words weren't threatening, not outright, but they felt like a blade pressed against his spine. He stood, pacing the kitchen, the floorboards groaning under his steps. The house felt too big, too empty. What do you want? He demanded. The voice didn't answer right away. Instead, there was a pause, long enough to make him question if the call had dropped. Then, I just wanted to check if you're still listening, Jacob. You always were a good listener. His stomach churned. The way the voice said his name, it was too personal, too knowing. He glanced at the windows, half expecting to see a face pressed against the glass. Nothing but darkness and the faint sway of trees. I don't know you, he said, voice cracking. Stop calling me. Another chuckle, colder this time. You'll remember soon enough. The line went dead. The phone's screen blinked back to its lock screen, leaving Jacob staring at his own reflection in the dark glass. His pulse raced, his thoughts a jumbled mess. That voice, he knew it, but from where? He couldn't place it, no matter how hard he tried. The house was too quiet now, the silence pressing in, heavy and unnatural. He set the phone down, hands shaking, and tried to shake off the creeping dread. He moved to the living room, where an old fireplace sat cold and unused. The furniture was still covered in dust sheets from when his aunt lived here. He hadn't bothered unpacking much since moving in a week ago. The house wasn't his, not really. It was just a place to finish his book, away from the noise of the city. But now it felt like a trap. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, different from the first. His heart sank. He didn't want to answer, but his hand moved on its own, like some instinct he couldn't control. Hello, he whispered. You're still not remembering, the voice said, the same voice, unchanged despite the new number. That's disappointing, Jacob. I thought you'd be quicker than this. Who the hell are you? He snapped, his voice echoing in the empty room. What do you want from me? A pause, then the voice spoke again, slower, deliberate. Do you remember the lake, the one behind the old mill? Jacob froze. The lake. He hadn't thought about it in years. A memory flickered, cold water, laughter, a summer night long ago. But it was blurry, like a dream he couldn't quite hold on to. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You know," the voice said, almost teasing. "You were there, so was I." The call ended abruptly, leaving Jacob in silence again. His chest tightened, his breath shallow. He didn't remember anyone at the lake, not clearly. Just fragments, a bonfire, voices, a scream. Or was it laughter? He couldn't tell. He paced to the window, staring out at the dark forest beyond the yard. The pines seemed to lean closer, their shadows twisting in the moonlight. The phone vibrated again, this time with a text. His hands trembled as he opened it. A photo loaded slowly, a grainy image of a boy by a lake, standing near a fire. Jacob's breath caught. The boy looked like him, maybe 10 years old, his face lit by flickering flames. But he didn't remember that night. Not like this. Another buzz, another text. "Look closer." He zoomed in on the photo. In the background, half hidden by smoke, was another figure. Smaller, blurry, but unmistakable. A child watching him. Jacob's heart pounded. He didn't remember anyone else being there, who had taken this photo. And why was it sent to him now? He set the phone down, his hands clammy. The house creaked, a low groan from somewhere upstairs. He told himself it was just the old wood settling, but the sound felt too deliberate, too alive. He grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and climbed the stairs, each step louder than the last. The air grew colder as he reached the second floor, the hallway stretching out like a tunnel. At the end of the hall was his aunt's old study, a room he hadn't explored yet. The door was ajar, a sliver of moonlight spilling out. He pushed it open, the hinges squealing. Inside, shelves lined the walls, packed with books and dusty trinkets. A desk sat in the corner, piled with papers. Something drew him to it, a pull he couldn't explain. He rifled through the papers, his flashlight beam shaking. Old bills, letters, a faded photograph. He stopped. The photo showed 2 kids by a lake, one of them unmistakably him. The other was a boy, maybe a year younger, with dark hair and a shy smile. Jacob's stomach twisted. He didn't remember this boy, but the sight of him stirred something. A pang of guilt, sharp and sudden. The phone buzzed in his pocket, nearly making him drop the photo. Another unknown number. He answered, his voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" "You found it, didn't you?" the voice said, calm and certain. "The picture, you're starting to remember." "Who are you?" Jacob's voice broke. "Why are you doing this?" "My name's Elijah," the voice said, and the name hit Jacob like a punch. Elijah. It echoed in his mind, stirring fragments of memory, a boy's laughter, a splash in the water, a cry cut short. "You left me, Jacob. You ran." "I don't know what you're talking about," Jacob shouted, his voice echoing in the study. The flashlight flickered, casting jagged shadows on the walls. He spun around, half expecting to see someone behind him. Nothing, just the empty room. But then he heard it, a soft thud like footsteps downstairs. His heart raced. He clutched the phone, the voice still speaking, low and steady. "You can't run forever, you owe me." Jacob stumbled out of the study, the flashlight beam darting across the hallway. The footsteps grew louder, deliberate, coming from the living room. He descended the stairs, each step a battle against the fear clawing at his chest. The living room was dark, the dust sheets glowing faintly in the moonlight. But something was wrong. One of the sheets had been pulled off, crumpled on the floor. He froze, his breath catching. In the corner near the fireplace stood a figure, tall, still, draped in shadow. It didn't move, but Jacob felt its gaze, heavy and unyielding. His flashlight beam swept over it, but the light seemed to falter, swallowed by the darkness. "Who's there?" he called, his voice shaking. No answer, just the faint rustle of fabric like the figure was shifting. His phone buzzed again and he nearly dropped it. Another text, "Look behind you." His blood ran cold. He didn't want to turn, didn't want to know what was there. But he couldn't stop himself. Slowly, he turned, the flashlight trembling in his hand. The hallway was empty, but in the reflection of the window, he saw it. A figure standing just behind him, its face blurred but familiar. He spun back around, but the figure in the corner was gone. His heart hammered, his breath ragged. The phone buzzed again, insistent. He answered, his voice barely a whisper. "Please stop. You remember now, don't you?" The voice, Elijah's voice, said, soft and accusing. "The lake, the fire, you left me there." Jacob's knees buckled. Flashes of memory hit him, running through the woods, the sound of water, a cry for help he ignored. He didn't know why, didn't know what had happened, but the guilt was there, sharp and suffocating. "I'm sorry," he whispered, tears stinging his eyes. "I don't know what happened, I'm sorry." The line went silent, but the air in the room grew heavier, colder. He heard it again, footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the hallway. He turned, the flashlight beam catching nothing but empty space. But the feeling was there, the sense of something closing in. The phone buzzed one last time. He didn't want to look, didn't want to know. But he did. The screen glowed with a new message. "You can't apologize to a ghost." His breath stopped. The footsteps were closer now, right behind him. He felt it, a cold touch on his shoulder, like fingers brushing his skin. He spun around, the flashlight falling from his hand, plunging the room into darkness. And then a whisper, so close it felt like it was inside his skull. "Jacob." The world went black. The tires hummed against the asphalt, a steady drone that filled the silence of the late-night drive. I was somewhere in the suburbs of a small Illinois town, far from the familiar lights of Chicago. The road stretched out before me, flanked by quiet houses with dark windows, their porches bathed in the dim glow of streetlights. It was past midnight, and the world felt too still, like it was holding its breath. I'd been visiting Tim Keller, an old high school buddy, in this nowhere town. A few beers, some laughs about the old days, and now here I was, driving home through the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. The radio played low, some classic rock station cutting in and out with static. I adjusted the dial, but the signal kept fading, replaced by a faint whine that set my teeth on edge. The air smelled faintly of damp leaves and motor oil, carried through the cracked window. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake the fatigue from hours on the road. My name's Jake Murray, just a regular guy, 32, working it in the city. I wasn't one for ghost stories or late-night jitters, but something about this drive felt wrong. Like the darkness was heavier than it should be. I slowed as I approached a crossroad, the headlights catching the edge of an old railway station just off the road. It was abandoned, its weathered sign barely readable in the moonlight. Harrow's End Depot. The place had been shut down for decades, a relic of a time when trains still rolled through this part of the state. As a kid, I'd heard stories about it, whispers of accidents, strange sightings, the kind of tales kids tell to scare each other. I hadn't thought about it in years, but seeing it now sent a shiver down my spine. The station's windows were boarded up, the roof sagging like it was ready to collapse. I told myself it was just a building, nothing more. But the air felt colder as I passed it, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones. I pressed the gas, eager to leave the station behind. The road curved through the suburbs, past rows of identical houses and empty lots. The radio crackled again, the music cutting out entirely this time, replaced by a low, rhythmic hum. I frowned and tapped the dashboard, but it didn't help. The hum grew louder, almost like a voice, too faint to make out. I turned the radio off, but the sound didn't stop. It was coming from somewhere else, outside maybe, or inside my head. My grip tightened on the wheel. "Just tired," I muttered, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet car. "Get a grip, Jake." The headlights flickered, just for a second, casting the road into darkness before snapping back on. My heart skipped a beat. I glanced at the dashboard, but everything seemed fine. Probably just a loose wire, I told myself. But then I saw it, a shadow. It darted across the road, just beyond the reach of my headlights. Too fast to be a person, too solid to be a trick of the light. My foot eased off the gas, and the car slowed to a crawl. I squinted into the darkness, searching the empty street. Nothing. Just the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, and that damn hum, still lingering in my ears. I shook my head, trying to laugh it off. "You're seeing things, man." But my pulse was racing, and the air felt thicker now, like it was pressing against my chest. I rolled the window down further, hoping the cool night air would clear my head. Instead, a sharp, acrid smell hit me, like burnt wires mixed with something sour, something wrong. I coughed, my throat tightening, and glanced in the rearview mirror. The street behind me was empty, but the feeling of being watched crawled up my spine. I kept driving, the road stretching on through the quiet suburbs. The houses gave way to a stretch of open land, dotted with skeletal trees and overgrown weeds. The railway station loomed in the distance again, its silhouette jagged against the night sky. I hadn't realized the road looped back this way. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to see that place again, not tonight. The radio snapped on by itself, the static now a deafening roar. I slammed my hand against the power button, but it wouldn't turn off. The hum was back, louder, clearer, almost forming words. I couldn't make them out, but they felt like a warning. My hands were slick with sweat, slipping on the wheel. The headlights flickered again, longer this time, plunging the road into darkness for a heartbeat. When they came back on, I saw it again. The shadow. It was standing in the middle of the road, just beyond the station. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as the car lurched to a stop. My chest heaved, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. The thing stood there, unmoving, a dark shape against the faint glow of the streetlights. It wasn't a person. It was too tall, too thin, its edges blurring like smoke caught in the wind. I couldn't see a face, just a void where one should have been. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. It was like the thing was holding me there, pinning me with its presence. The air grew colder, the smell sharper, burning my throat. The hum from the radio turned into a low, guttural whisper, echoing inside my skull. "Stay," it said, the words slithering through my thoughts. I shook my head, my hands fumbling for the gear shift. "No way," I whispered, my voice trembling. I threw the car into reverse, my foot slamming on the gas. The tires squealed as I backed away, my eyes locked on the shadow. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching. I spun the wheel, turning the car around, and floored it. The road blurred past, the houses and trees a smear in the darkness. My heart was still racing, my hands shaking as I gripped the wheel. The radio was silent now, but the whisper lingered in my head like it had carved itself into my thoughts. I kept driving, desperate to put distance between me and that thing. The road twisted through the suburbs, leading me toward a small, all-night gas station I'd passed earlier. Its neon sign glowed in the distance, a faint beacon in the night. I needed to stop, to breathe, to figure out what the hell was happening. I pulled into the gas station, the gravel crunching under my tires. The place was nearly deserted, just a single clerk inside the brightly lit store. I parked near the pumps and sat there for a moment, my hands still trembling. The air outside was cold, carrying that same acrid smell, but fainter now. I glanced around, half expecting to see the shadow lurking between the pumps. Nothing, just the hum of the neon sign and the distant chirp of crickets. I stepped out of the car, my legs shaky, and headed toward the store. The bell above the door jingled as I walked in, the fluorescent lights harsh against my eyes. The clerk, a middle-aged guy with a name tag that read Eddie, looked up from a magazine. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale like he hadn't slept in days. "Late night, huh?" he said, his voice flat, almost mechanical. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just passing through." He stared at me a little too long, his gaze heavy, like he was looking through me. "You see anything weird out there?" he asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. My stomach churned. "What do you mean?" I said, trying to keep my tone casual. Eddie leaned forward, his fingers tapping the counter. "Folks around here talk about things, shadows, stuff that moves when it shouldn't." He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just stories, though, right?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Right," I said, grabbing a bottle of water from the cooler and tossing some cash on the counter. I needed to get out of there. Eddie's stare followed me as I walked back to the car, the bell jingling behind me. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands still shaking as I twisted the cap off the water bottle. The cold liquid did little to calm my nerves. I glanced at the gas station window. Eddie was still watching, his silhouette framed against the light. For a moment, I thought I saw something else. A flicker of movement behind him, a shadow that didn't belong. I started the car and pulled out, the tires kicking up gravel as I sped back onto the road. The station's neon sign faded in the rearview mirror, but the feeling of being watched didn't. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty road ahead. The railway station was coming up again, its jagged outline looming closer with every second. I didn't want to go near it, but the road didn't give me a choice. It was like the town was pulling me back, forcing me to face that place again. The air grew colder as I approached the station, the smell of burnt wire stronger now. The headlights flickered, then dimmed, casting the road in a faint, sickly glow. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. The whisper came again, louder this time, a low hiss that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "You can't leave," it said, the words wrapping around my thoughts like a vice. I shook my head, trying to block it out, but it was no use. The voice was inside me now. And then I saw it, the shadow. It was standing on the platform of the railway station, just beyond the reach of my headlights. Its form was clearer now, tall, impossibly thin, its edges shifting like smoke. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel it watching me, its presence heavy, suffocating. My foot hovered over the gas pedal, but I couldn't move. It was like the car was frozen, the engine humming uselessly. The shadow moved, not walked, glided, its form stretching and twisting as it drifted closer to the road. My heart pounded, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I slammed my foot on the gas, but the car didn't budge. The headlights flickered out completely, plunging me into darkness. The whisper grew louder, a chorus of voices now, all saying the same thing. Stay, stay, stay. I fumbled for the door handle, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip it. The air inside the car was freezing now, my breath visible in the dim moonlight. I pushed the door open and stumbled out, my feet hitting the gravel with a crunch. The station loomed in front of me, its boarded-up windows like eyes staring down at me. I didn't want to go inside, but the road was too exposed, too open. I needed somewhere to hide. I ran toward the station, my shoes slipping on the loose gravel. The air was thick with that acrid smell, burning my throat as I pushed through the rusted gate. The platform was empty, the tracks below covered in weeds and broken glass. I ducked into the station's entrance, the wooden door creaking as it swung open. Inside, the air was damp, heavy with the scent of mold and rusted metal. The floorboards groaned under my weight, and the faint drip of water echoed somewhere in the darkness. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart racing. The whisper was still there, fainter now but still present, like a pulse in the back of my mind. I tried to steady my breathing, to tell myself it was just my imagination, but deep down I knew better. That thing was real. It was out there, and it was coming for me. A sound broke the silence, a soft, deliberate scrape, like something dragging across the platform outside. My blood ran cold. I peered through a crack in the boarded-up window, my eyes straining to see into the darkness. The shadow was there, standing on the platform, its form flickering like a bad signal. It wasn't moving now, just standing, watching. Its shape seemed to pulse, growing larger, then smaller, as if it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. I backed away from the window, my hands shaking. The scraping sound came again, closer this time, followed by a low, guttural hum. The air grew colder, the smell of burnt wires so strong I could taste it. I needed to get out of here, but where could I go? The car was useless, the road was a trap, and this place, this rotting, forgotten station, was no safer. The whisper came again, louder, clearer, a voice that wasn't human. "You belong here," it said, the words echoing in my skull. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voice was inside me, burrowing deeper with every second. The scraping grew louder, faster, like claws dragging across the wooden floor. I spun around, my eyes darting through the darkness, but I couldn't see anything. Just shadows, stretching and twisting in the corners of the room. And then I saw it, the shadow. It was inside the station now, standing at the far end of the room. Its form was clearer, but still wrong, too tall, too thin, its edges blurring into the darkness. I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were rooted to the floor, my breath caught in my throat. The thing didn't move either. It just stood there, watching, its presence a weight that pressed against my chest. The hum grew louder, a deafening roar now, filling the room with sound. The air was freezing, the smell overwhelming. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the wall. The shadow moved closer, its form stretching, elongating, like it was feeding off the darkness. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't. It was like the thing was holding me there, trapping me in its gaze. And then it spoke again. "You can't run," The voice was everywhere, inside and outside, a chorus of whispers that drowned out my thoughts. My knees buckled, and I slid to the floor, my hands clutching my head. The shadow was closer now, so close I could feel its cold, suffocating presence. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. It was something alive, something that wanted me. A light flickered outside, a harsh, white glow that cut through the darkness. For a split second I saw it, the thing's face, or what passed for one. It wasn't human. It was a blur of shadows, a void that seemed to swallow the light around it. Its edges twisted, contorting into something that made my stomach lurch. The light blinked out, and the shadow was gone. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding. I didn't know where it had gone, but I wasn't waiting to find out. I ran for the door, my shoes slamming against the floorboards. The air outside was just as cold, just as heavy, but I didn't stop. I sprinted toward the car, my hands fumbling for the keys. The headlights were still off, the engine silent, but I didn't care. I needed to get out of here. I slid into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut, my fingers shaking as I turned the key. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I floored the gas, the tires screeching as I sped away from the station. The road stretched out before me, dark and endless, but I didn't care. I just needed to keep moving. The whisper was still there, fainter now, but persistent. "You're already gone," it said, the words curling through my thoughts like smoke. I shook my head, trying to focus on the road, but the shadows in the corners of my vision seemed to move, to shift, like they were alive. The headlights flickered again, casting strange shapes across the pavement. I glanced in the rearview mirror, my heart stopping for a moment. It was there, in the backseat. The shadow, its form clearer now, but still wrong. Its face, if you could call it that, was a swirling mass of darkness, pulsing with an unnatural life. I screamed, the sound raw and desperate, as I yanked the wheel, swerving into another street. The car lurched, the tires screeching, but the shadow didn't move. It just sat there, watching, its presence a weight that crushed the air from my lungs. I didn't know where I was going anymore. The streets blurred together, the houses and trees a smear in the darkness. The radio snapped on again, the static now a deafening scream. The whisper was louder, clearer, a voice that wasn't human. "You belong to us," it said, the words cutting through me like a knife. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop in the middle of the street. My hands were shaking, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I couldn't look in the mirror. I couldn't. But I could feel it, feel its presence pressing against me, suffocating me. The air was thick, the smell of burnt wires choking me. I fumbled for the door handle, my fingers numb, but it wouldn't open. The lock was stuck, the car a cage. The tapping started again. Soft at first, then louder, more insistent. It was coming from the window just behind me. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I turned my head, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. It was there, pressed against the window. Its face was clearer now, but it wasn't a face. It was a void, a shifting mass of shadows that pulsed with life. Its hand, or what passed for one, was pressed against the glass, leaving a trail of something dark and wet. The tapping grew faster, more frantic, like it was trying to get in. I screamed again, my voice breaking as I slammed my foot on the gas. The car lurched forward, the tires screeching as I sped through the empty streets. But the tapping didn't stop. It was louder now, echoing inside the car, inside my head. The shadow was still there, its presence a weight that crushed me. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't outrun it. The road stretched on, the streetlights flickering like dying stars. The whisper was constant now, a chorus of voices that filled every corner of my mind. "You're already gone," they said, over and over, until the words were all I could hear. The car was moving too fast, the speedometer climbing higher and higher. I tried to brake, but the pedal was useless. The wheel wouldn't turn. The road was disappearing, swallowed by a darkness that seemed to pulse with life. The headlights flickered out, plunging me into a void. And then it spoke one last time, its voice a blade that cut through my soul. "You are ours." The car lurched forward, the world collapsing into darkness. The tapping stopped. The whisper stopped. Everything stopped. But I knew it wasn't over. It was still there, waiting, watching. And no matter where I went, it would always be there. I had never believed in monsters. Not the kind with claws or fangs, not the kind you could fight or run from. But as the darkness closed in, I realized I'd been wrong. This thing wasn't a shadow, wasn't a trick of the light. It was something else, something ancient, something that had been waiting for me all along. And it had found me. Thank you for spending this time with Brad Arrows. We hope the stories whispered through the rain carried you far into your imagination or your dreams. If you're still awake, let us know how you liked the journey. Until next time, stay safe, sleep well, and let the darkness comfort you.